What's up, Marvelous DeMystifiers? I love my new intro, but I made a custom one just for the Loki series we're doing. I seem to have skipped a step where I needed to compress the video because StreamYard got a little touchy about playing it. Next time it'll run smoothly. But I'm really glad that we're doing this. I had a bit of a scheduling mishap with, I consider it a little fortunate because this is actually a lot of fun. But the InnerVerse episode that was going to be tonight wound up not falling through per se, but being postponed. So that's going to be a great one. I can't wait for that one. A little preview. It's all about Ophiuchus deep dive. But in the meantime, as fortune would have it, we've got this awesome Loki series ongoing, and I don't see any reason not to keep striking while the fire's hot or the iron's hot or what have you. So here we are, me and Slick, ready to break this one down. Episode 3 of Season 1 of Loki. This episode is called Lamentis, and I don't think that we can really waste time. I think we got to get right into it because there's so much to talk about. I try to be concise, but oh my gosh, it will be 30 or 45 minutes in before we even get past probably the first 10 seconds of the show. It's really fun. So if you guys have been along on the journey so far, awesome. If not, we're going to be giving a nice overview of sort of like a blow by blow of the plot, at least enough that you're going to understand it. And even if Marvel or comic book TV shows or movies ain't your thing, as always, this series is an incredible launch pad, really, for us to talk about symbolism and the keys to the esoteric system, the mystery school. So, I mean, that's what I love about it. Because there's so many different facets of this mythos and of this religion, of this universal priestcraft. And it's like, how do you even begin explaining it to people? You know, how do you take what's in your head, Gabe, and put it in the heads of the other people? All of the syncretism. I don't really know where to start, but when you have an allegory to work from, that's a great framework for us to be able to discuss these things and teach about these things. And I think that's why the scriptures were always in allegory form in the first place, because that's like the best way to do it. So whether or not you're comic book nerds or fans, you're going to like this conversation. It's going to be fun. Tell your friend. Dylan's on it. Lamented one. Bacchus much? Dude, it's so Bacchus. This whole episode is welcome to the Bacchus show, where you get to find out that Loki is actually Bacchus. Yeah. So what's up, Gabe? How you doing, man? Good evening.
Yeah, glorious, wonderful, awesome. I'm super stoked for this. Yeah, this one really has a very crystal clear conveyance that I think we got our finger on the pulse. So I'm stoked to bring this one forward. Yeah, because you mentioned the adjustment card, and when you told me adjustment card, I knew exactly where to focus all of the symbolic potentiality. Because this is where he meets his other self. He kind of this other Loki, this renegade Loki, is kind of like his animus, you know. So there's kind of a come
100%.
to Jesus, dealing with the shadow. All these things are kind of intrinsic, and how mercurial, of course, that there have to be multiple Lokis.
Yeah, the twin symbolism. Gotta have it. The Gemini character. So as you see here, the name of this episode is Lamentis, and let's get right into it. So when we hear the word Lamentis, I don't know about you, but the first thing I think of is the book of Lamentations of the Bible, right? So here's a couple of images of the prophet Jeremiah lamenting the destruction of Jerusalem. We'll talk about both of these things before we even get into the episode, because these are frameworks that are necessary if that's the allegory, and it definitely is. One thing I want to point out here is the holding of the head, the lamentation posture that he's got going on here. I may have even missed a few times where it popped up, but I definitely had my eyes peeled for that, and I think that there's at least one or two other times that it shows up. So Jeremiah, the prophet, let's talk about that. That name Jeremiah is Yah, Ra, Maya, or Maya. So you have the God or the Lord, Yah, and then Ra, the sun, and then Maya or Maya. That's illusion, or the name of the mother of Buddha, the name of the mother of Mercury. In Hebrew, the name Jeremiah is Yer-Maya-Hu. Yer-Maya-Hu. Also, sometimes they spell it with like that Yahoo phonetic, which is... Anyway, the other thing about the Jere, Jera, of Jeremiah, that's potentially, you could also say that's Hiero, as in sacred, like hieroglyphics, sacred writing. So Jeremiah, Hiero Maya, the sacred Maya, sacred mother. Now, the book of Lamentations is a collection of poetic laments for the destruction of Jerusalem, and the motifs of a traditional Mesopotamian city lament are evident in the book, such as mourning the desertion of the city by God, its destruction, and then later the ultimate return of the divinity. So big time allegory here. There's also a lamentation of the sacrificed or the fallen deity that resurrects. That's part of Lamentations when we bring that word up.
You know, I got to point out there's a time pad, a temp pad shape right there under his hand. The shadow of that archway is in the shape the iconic shape of the temp pad, which is going to be the MacGuffin of this episode, on the black and white sketch. If you look, go up a little, right there, the shape of the shadow on that archway is the shape of one of the temp pads, which is the MacGuffin of the episode. Which, from my read, I think the temp pad is the Fornax constellation for 1,000 different reasons. But I just wanted to bring that shape into people's minds. It's fascinating that when you look up Lamentations, you find an image that is correspondent to the temp pad. That is really fascinating. You weren't even, you're looking at this not through the eyes of Loki, and you're still finding iconic shadow play in the art.
Ginny says, isn't it interesting that seemingly the only variant consistently being chased by the TVA in this show are Loki variants? Only the Bacchus figure can transcend time. That's actually a really good point. And when you look at Bacchus or Dionysus in his form as Phanes, or Mithras as Phanes, we'll bring Phanes up later, but that's the character that is born from the Orphic egg, and that egg was laid by Kronos or time, or created by time, or Brahma, depending on which system, but it's all the same mythos in different cultures. So in the Book of Lamentations, there's a couple of verses here that I'll pull up that demonstrate the astrotheology of this book and thus inform us on what to look out for symbolically in this episode. This is all from chapter 1 of the 5, or book 1 of Lamentations of the 5 books. The ways of Zion do mourn, because none come to the solemn feasts. All her gates are desolate. Her priests sigh. Her virgins are afflicted, and she is in bitterness. The Lord hath trodden underfoot all my mighty men in the midst of me. He hath called an assembly against me to crush my young men. The Lord hath trodden the virgin, the daughter of Judah, as in a winepress. Behold, O Lord, for I am in distress. My bowels are troubled. Mine heart is turned within me, for I have grievously rebelled. Abroad, the sword bereaveth. At home there is death. So we're in the transition from Virgo to Libra, in my opinion, or just that general time period from the hot part of the summer, Leo, but after the sun starting to decline, to the gates of judgment in Libra. So Leo, Virgo, Libra, those three. I mean, heart is the Leo part of the zodiac man. The bowels, that's Virgo. My bowels are troubled.
Totally.
So we also need to talk about the Lamentations of Tamas. That's a huge one. So here's Tamas from the Sumerian system, if you will. Also known as Dumuzi. In the Mesopotamian religion, he's the god of fertility, embodying the powers for new life in nature in the spring. And it's obvious, with this imagery that Tamas looks a lot like Osiris. He was known as a shepherd. He has an underworld cycle with his sister, very similar to the Demeter story, very important to this. And another good comment from Dylan, Bacchus is time, Saturn/Kronos. And if you look at the status quo, they believe they're all the same accounts of Noah, called by other names by different cultures. I'm actually going to quote a thing that's in one of your books, Dylan, where I can't remember which book it was. I think it might be July's End. I guess I didn't make a note of it. But it's one of the Spirit World books where you quote Thomas Hyde in Eternia Mundi. Oh, wait, it's a Godsaker. Okay, book 4 of Spirit World. So this is maybe a truncated quote, but Thomas Hyde, I believe a church father, says, their Osiris, by another name, was called Bacchus, the so-called weeping. Among the Sabians, the people of Phoenicia, it is celebrated in the middle of the month of Tammuz, the Lamentations. That's July. It was the feast of Bokat, of weeping women, which was celebrated in favor of Tammuz. But the women wept for him, as his master slew him, and he smashed his bones in a millstone, and afterwards scattered them in pieces. Of course, they understand the sun by the name of Tammuz, But the prophet Ezekiel mentions this institution in chapter 8 of the women who mourn for Tammuz, or the sun, whose month of July was sacred and was named by him with Tammuz, the Syrian of the Phoenicians, since the month was very hot and filled with the sun. But the sun's departure, because it then begins to decline, they lamented, feigning that he was slain by his master and scattered to pieces. But at the beginning of the spring of the year, the approach and reinvention of the same Osiris, that of a circuitous man, was wont to bring forth no small joy to them. And the sun was called Osir. Sounds like Aesir, right? Loki is with the Aesir. The sun was called Osir, or a circuitor, on account of the ceremony of weeping for him. And by another name he was called Bacchus, who in the words of Herodotus was Osiris. Very important, especially if you have, jumped ahead watching this series to season 2, the circuitor, that element. You see Loki going through entire time loops where he jumps forward and ends up in the past and jumps backwards and ends up forwards. He doesn't know which way he's going, but that's getting ahead of us. Like Tammuz, though, Adonis is also slain by the boar's tusk of winter, but eventually ransomed from Hades by the prayers of the goddess Aphrodite. And Adonis, by the way, Adonai is what the Old Testament calls Jehovah all the time. And Adonis is also an epithet of Bacchus, according to the mainstream. But always remember this. This is one thing that I hope you take away from our talks, is that the huge plurality of gods in mythological systems is mostly due to the misunderstanding the mainstream has that one god or goddess has many, many names in different cultures, or letter swaps create different versions of the name for different dialects, different spellings, and that epithets are confused for individual extra gods. And then the last thing to say about Tammuz here for now is that, an example of what I'm talking about, allegedly Zeus had a wife named Themis, which is basically Tammuz. That's, in my opinion, where the name of the river Thames in England comes from, the river that goes through London. And Themis was a personification of justice, divine order, and law. So here we have that Libra symbolism again. All right, Gabe, I know you're ready to let her rip on all that.
It's very interesting that in the Crowley book that I went ahead and looked up on the adjustment card, it totally had all the agreement in the world because he brought up the battle between Nemesis and Themis, basically Nemesis and Themis, which is the two sisters, the day and the night, the victory and justice.
I just noticed that Themis is an anagram for Metis. Metis meaning wisdom, right, was an epithet for Athena, and also Phanes, the figure also called Dionysus that burst forth from the Orphic egg, the world egg, was called Metis as well. So, when you start mixing up their so-called epithets and alternate names, you realize, it's all the same guy. It's all the same guy here, who's also a girl.
It's the metamorphosis of the sky, going through its own shape shifting, for sure.
Circuitor.
In his chapter on the adjustment card, he brings forward the Lambdoma, Lambdoma, is part of the harmony he was expressing with the adjustment card. And the Lambdoma is a old calculator, basically. It's the first rebus. What am I thinking of? the Chinese calculator, and it's called the ABAX. And it's very fascinating to me because Lambdoma definitely echoes or rhymes with Lamentis, which is
Mm.
the name of this episode in particular. But I sent you a little copy from the book.
Or Lamed, the Hebrew version of the lambda or L. Lamed,
Right. Because,
Lamentis, and Lamed is the
yeah,
letter that's on the adjustment card.
yes. And this is a rite of passage that we're about to go through. A million rites of passage, including jumping through windows, all kinds of archways and toppling constructs, the fall of civilization in general. Um, and
Tons of
that
tower
Lamed is,
moments at the end.
yes. And the ox goad or the Lamed is correspondent also with the hook. So there's the hook and the flail. One is a right angle, and the other one is kind of a curly Q. But those are both listed in the Thoth description in the official manual by the book, if as it were. Which, by the way, I don't really recommend this book very much. I find this book to be walking in a million small circles and not really getting anywhere. But there are some good nuggets in there. It's just not really instructional or informative, uh, other than telling you what the actual signs and glyphs really mean on each card. But one of the locations that inspired the adjustment card in particular was said to be uh, the Notre Dame Cathedral. And I think he was implying that the harmonic resonance of the building, architectural resonance, is part of the imagery that is in the adjustment card. And that's very fascinating to me, looking back at what happened to the Notre Dame Cathedral and what ends up happening at the end of this specific episode. I found that to be very
Wow.
apropos. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, we'll get back into that. I have a feeling because I saw the images that you cobbled together and sent to me, and I know there's a particular one that you love to bring up anytime it's appropriate. So, now that we've laid some groundwork, the first thing that we get in this episode before we even see any shots is music. The Marvel logo starts to play or go up, but they're playing some music in the background, and the lyrics were, it had that sort of like mathematical perfect beat that just forces you to tap your foot, like some kind of sorcery. And the first lyrics were really interesting, so I went and looked up more about it. So the opening song is apparently called Demons by someone called Haley Kiyoko. And I looked into this Haley Kiyoko, and Kiyoko, she's the Disney version of the Dark Virgin. She's like a Miley Cyrus character from the age of 5, groomed to be the character she's going to be, and taken from a friendly, wholesome, like gay representative for teenagers to a full-on, I've got demons in my head, So the lyrics to the song, they actually, in this episode, they skip the first line because the first line of the song is, please forgive me, I've got demons in my head. But they skip that part and they start you on the line, there's something in the water. I don't like the flavor. I don't like the taste. Searching for nirvana, something that'll take it all away from me. Don't bother me. My misery, it's holding me. Won't let me speak. Please forgive me. I've got demons in my head. Trying to eat me, trying to feed me lies till I'm dead. So that's dark. This gal, she's around my age. I almost said our age, but I forget you're older than me. So she's 32 currently. Sometimes, she says, sometimes it gets severe and sometimes it's really scary, she explains. Demons was inspired by a memo on her phone that she'd kept. And it's like in this article, it's implied like that she just found it on her phone and didn't know she had written it. And it said, please forgive me. I've got demons in my head. They're trying to eat me until I'm dead. I had that on my phone, she says, and was like, whoa, that's really dark and scary. I'm concerned for myself. So this chick, Haley Kiyoko, if you look her up, all over the gay internet, she's being called lesbian Jesus. Lesbian Jesus. So that implies sacrifice if there's a Jesus involved. But I feel like that ought to just, I think we should just let that sort of ride, like leave that, you know, we get it. They're calling her lesbian Jesus. Make of that what you will. It's actually super disturbing. This is like the really disturbing aspect of Disney, where, you know, they have these people on a assembly line from the age of from when they're a small child all the way up to when they're corrupted, demon infested monsters. Juan says, please forgive me. I've got homunculi in my head. We can forgive that. What's up, Juan? Good to see you, man. But to continue looking at her, just because I kind of got into a morbid fascination. I'd never even heard of this chick. But here's some of her filmography. Famous for Wizards of Waverly Place, which was when I was about a 18-year-old is when that was popular. And this was before Disney could like openly do gay stuff, but they had her as a 13-year-old, or I guess maybe she would have been like a 15-year-old. I don't know exactly, but you know, had her as basically as a gay, closeted gay character where they acted gay. Anyway,
Wow.
It's a bummer, but when you look into how she got her start in her career, this is where it gets really fishy. Kiyoko was discovered at the age of 5 when she went with her friend to a photo shoot. The director asked her to step in front of the camera, and she ended up in a national print ad for KnowledgeWare. So I'm like, okay, what's KnowledgeWare? KnowledgeWare was a software company headquartered in Atlanta, Georgia. So if you know now, Atlanta, Georgia is the new Hollywood. Hollywood is all shifted there. All the Loki filming and all the Disney Marvel filming and lots of other shows it's the new Hollywood. But back when this gal was 5, it wouldn't have been the new Hollywood yet. But we can see that the mafia or whatever had its thing going already. KnowledgeWare is an interesting name. You know, knowledge is gnosis or wisdom. Where is the same as the word ver, as in variant, which we covered that off last episode pretty deeply. But that word where or ver is flow or river or change. So KnowledgeWare is like the flow of knowledge or the changing of knowledge. Very bizarre. Mm-hmm. The company's founder, I believe, or the guy who co-founded and run by this guy Tarkenton. Tarkenton is credited with having coined, quote, "A fool with a tool is a faster fool." So this guy and his co-founder or partner or whatever were eventually involved in legal shenanigans brought about by the SEC for engaging in fraudulent schemes to inflate their financial results to meet sales and earnings projections. So very obvious that this KnowledgeWare company was some kind of like front, money laundering, mafia shit. And that's where this poor girl got discovered, so-called.
Yeah.
And now to go back to
her name is like almost okie dokie, it's like Little Miss go along, get along, everything's good, say yes a lot.
So in the book of Jeremiah, allegedly the prophet, Hiero Maya, the sacred Maya, he or she says, "For my people have committed 2 evils. They have forsaken me with the fountain of living waters and hewed them out cisterns, broken cisterns that can hold no water." And in chapter 17, verse 3, it says, "O Lord, the hope of Israel, all that forsake thee shall be ashamed, and they that depart from me shall be written in the earth, because they have forsaken the Lord, the fountain of living waters." Back to the lyrics that you hear, the very first lyrics of this song. That's the beginning of this episode. There's something in the water. I don't like the flavor. I don't like the taste.
And Chance, again, I keep seeing it. The Fornax constellation is at the foot of the Uranus River in the heavens. And so it's literally in a bend, in an oxbow of the river. Like the river does a really dramatic loop on itself. And inside of that loop is where the Fornax constellation is. And so these lyrics about the water tastes weird, and then even in the biblical uh, uh, aspect of that you were rapping about the water separating the waters. Uh, Again, I'm seeing alchemy. I'm seeing all these elements of alchemy that the Fornax constellation is known for. It's sometimes called the chemistry set, the alchemy. Uh, I think it's like the alchemy chemistry of the constellation. I think is one of its names. It has a few different names, but it just keeps coming up. And you just said it again, and it was in the painting that was correspondent with that biblical verse as well.
It's interesting because maybe you already said this, but the Fornax constellation is four-pointed, like a four-sided polygon. It's not a parallelogram or a rhombus or anything, but it's quite correspondent to a lot of shapes that you see in the mise en scène of this episode. So I'll point them out when I'm sure they'll be in some of the screenshots, but I'll be like, "There's Fornax right there," because it's in there.
Yep. And one of the symbols that catches my eye the most will be a rectangle or a cube or monolith almost, but it has an archway access portal, almost like a mouse entry. That just a standard arch. So the combination of a square or a rhomboid with a horseshoe shaped access point to me is screaming out alchemy, 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 Fornax, which is the origin of the word fornication. The word fornication comes from Fornax. And so in this episode where Loki is testing his own chemistry, he's seeing what his own shadow self is like. He's like, which we'll get to, but they're testing each other's alchemy to see how they can get along, how they work together, alchemically speaking. So yeah, it's both. It is erotic, but it's also just interpersonal intelligence as well. It's kind of walking a thin line there.
Thinking about the four of Fornax too, and how Hermes or Mercury or Loki is the number sacred is 4, and how Nax is basically nex, like nexus, which is a word. It means basically the same as religare or ligare. Actually, I'll save that because we'll talk about that again later. Nexuses are important to this show. Maybe not this episode specifically. But when we here we are, the opening shot where we actually see something on the screen. And we got ourselves a Mai Tai. We see the Mai Tai very clearly in the scene. They show it. They make sure that you know what it is, in my opinion. If you know your drinks. And the Mai Tai, again, just brings me right back to thinking of Maya, illusion, and the mother of Buddha. And in this scene, the female Loki is creating a psychic illusion, tying up C20. So the Maya, tying her up, tied up in an illusion. I mean, it's actually pretty sweet symbolism that they thought of that. Also, I found out the origin of Mai Tai is a Tahitian word that means good or excellent. And I don't know much about Tahiti, but that's basically, isn't that what mighty means? You're good or excellent. You're mighty. Mai Tai. So there's an interesting linguistic sync. Also in this scene with the Mai Tais, Sylvie is wearing tie-dye. So that's
nice. Fun. Very nice.
Then there's a line about the health department. How many times the health department has shut this place down. The shutdown makes me definitely think, okay, we're being, signaled about the Libra moment, the gates of winter, the justice, health department bringing the justice, shutting it down, the fall and death. And as the demons song keeps playing in the background, we get this scene where C20 is getting a brain freeze. And Sylvie says, you know what a brain freeze is, right? It's so cold that the roof of your mouth gets so cold that it freezes the synapse of your brain. And, alongside it, that demons song just keeps playing in the background. But this idea of your memories being literally frozen in place, to me, that's definitely another biofield reference. And in particular, it's interesting that the freezing of the roof of the mouth is going on, because it's about, C20, it's on the tip of her tongue. She's almost revealing the information that Sylvie's trying to interrogate out of her, but she can't quite do it. And the throat chakra, is about what you can or can't say, but also what you can or can't hear. And then we have, all of a sudden it's the night. So we've gone through the gates of Libra and it's nighttime. And C20 is kind of the afflicted one of the afflicted virgins of the Book of Lamentations, I think. And then back in the real world, you have the temples being touched by Sylvie, her memories being frozen in place. And she says in the scene, she's probably just tired. Mai Tai red. She wore red and she's drinking Mai Tais. Silly puns.
Right.
Waiting there. And then we see Sylvie's head. Oh, go ahead.
Can you go back one more image? Maybe even one more. Okay, this is a great one. I love that you mentioned the temple, that she's like communicating through the temple, because the card that we're focusing on for this episode, the adjustment card, was said to be inspired by the French, the Temple of the French. And I was like, Temple of the French? That's Notre Dame. So it's very interesting that we're mentioning the temple here, while she's attempting to extract information from her, almost Inception style, very much like the Inception concept of infiltrating somebody's internal privacy of their mind. But the two Mai Tai cups, Chance, those are like the bowls of the Justice card, right? One Mai Tai cup is a little more drank, the other one is a little more full. So the mechanistics of the Justice card, she's trying to tip the balance of the scales in her favor. She's trying to cheat the system by using these mechanics of the mind. But also, I think those two bowls of the adjustment card, I think they represent the two borealises of the fall season. If we go right past Buotes, we have the Corona Borealis. Remember, that's kind of a semicircle shape. It's the one that I think it's an apple with a bite taken out of it. Well, sure enough, it's about 90 degrees later, one season later, and you're coming out of Corona Australis. And Corona Australis is basically the same thing again. It's like the other end of a cave. So I think of like going into the underworld and journeys through the cave. I think it's correspondent with these two borealises, these two coronas, the Corona Borealis and the Corona Australis. But I just think it's fascinating because she's infiltrating her underworld. She's infiltrating her mental sanctuary by trying to penetrate even into her heavens, by sharing a common drink. They have a common shared space here. And so I just think it's fascinating that they're actually mapping out the sky map very, very accurately. But then, Chance, I want to point at the orb that's decorating the sky. because can you pull up an adjustment card? Or
Oh,
maybe
save
you
it.
can pull up.
Save it. I've got them.
Oh,
I've
okay.
got that. Yeah. You're just getting ahead of my slideshow.
Okay,
You know,
all
I
right,
saw
all
that.
right.
I definitely noticed that. I wanted to
It's
point out
so
too that, you know, I hadn't thought about Fornax here, but there is a scene later on where the Lyra constellation appears in the form of someone playing a harp like instrument. And Lyra is,
nice.
you know, right under Fornax, basically.
Nice. Yes.
Cetus,
And
the sea monster, is kind of between them, but not completely. You know, they're definitely in the ballpark
right,
with each other. They're part of the same stellar tableau.
right. In the Fornax constellation it's a multi-layered trigger. I want to put this all on the map. It's both like fornication, right? So it's porn, forn, your
Oh,
cell
yeah, good
phone.
example of the F and the P switching, which they do.
F, yep. So the fornication is on record on the phone. Now it's going to be fought over between a male and a woman. So it could be construed as like who you texting, who have you been fornicating with? Who have you been phonicating with? But it also is a trigger for global warming. Do you believe in global warming? Do you not believe in global warming? But it's also even a trigger for what I'll save the last one for the end. I'll keep a couple in my pocket. But it
Okay.
is a it's a multifaceted trigger that has many different attachment points, and it just blows my mind that it's the MacGuffin of the film, and that unpacks a million different ways.
The TemPad you're talking about, their little time travel iPhone.
Yep.
So this broken horn on the left side of her head is a very important symbolically, definitely, because first of all, the horns represent the rays of the sun, and the fact that one is broken, you know, the sun is weakening. We could say that much because we're in the fall. We're passing through the gates of judgment, Libra. That's what this episode's about. And we're also halfway through the 6-episode arc of the first season. So kind of fits. You know, it's the balance point in a way, in many ways. On top of that, it's the left side, the feminine side that's broken. And she's a, you know, to coin a word, she's a masculinated female. Loki is a feminized male. So this is, you know, the horns represent abundance, the rays of the sun, and the recipe for broken abundance energy in relationships is a feminized male and a overly masculinated female equals your abundance generation is borked at that point. You know, when when the two genders are in their healthy generative expression, then you have abundance. That's how it works. So now we see her going into the TVA, and in the background here, it seems like every time they show this locker room, we see this 26 in the middle of the shot. And here she is coming out next to the 26, you know, in that row. 26 is the, you know, the number most associated with the Tetragrammaton because Yod He Vav He equals 26. But I'll say it a million times. You know, I've said it before. I'll say it again. Yod He Vav He is not just Jehovah or Yahweh. It's also Eve. It's Yeve or it's you. And that's because the Yod can transliterate to an I. The He can become an E. The Vav a V. And the He an E. So that's Eve. And lest we not forget that according to... Oh, damn. Dylan's in the chat. He'll tell me who said this. He always has my back on this. But there's a, you know, it was said by the ancient writers that there was the worship of a serpent named Eve, but it was Bacchus. That Bacchus was worshipped as a serpent named Eve, essentially. So the point being the Tetragrammaton Yod He Vav He is not just Jehovah, it's also Eve. You know, the mother is the father. All that. Oh, Tacitus. There it is. I knew it. My boy. Thank you, Dylan.
Oh,
so after that, you know, the bell dings at this point, and the Minutemen go all hustling to their station, and she jumps them. And now I'm seeing look at how he's holding the phone to his head, or her holding her hands to people's head. Every time she does this now, I'm thinking of the Lamentation pose of Jeremiah.
Interesting. Yes. It's also that's also the pose. Artistically, this is conveying the idea of ennui, and ennui is a French term for boredom. But it's also like you're trying to think of a solution. You're stuck in musing to be in ennui. It's not it is boredom, but it means you have time on your hands and you have time to think. So you're very thoughtful and pensive, and you're not urgent. You have a sense about you like you're too cool to do anything because you're not urgent. So in some ways, ennui was kind of synonymous with being too cool for school. Uh, but it's also very commonly depicting sloth. This is a symbol for slothfulness or indolence, to be uh, to be leaning your head off to the side, especially if you're reclining. Uh, so she's going to try to knock him out, but it doesn't work. It actually activates him, and she has a moment where she's like, "Oh shit, my magic doesn't work here."
PK has a great comment here. Eve represents the physical body or the sexual components, and Adam the mind. And she's trying to, she's the Eve character tempting the mind. She's putting her fingertips touching the temple, and
Right.
yeah, it doesn't work. They're basically asexual creatures. These TVA foot soldiers. And
you know what? The money's not working. The light's not doing what it used to do, and so the money is actually losing its value. That's an interesting metaphor there too, because it's green.
so now we can get into talking about the Justice card. This is what Gabe was referring to, or the adjustment card, as it's called in the Crowley Tarot. You see these orbs behind them and around in this shot. I think very much that these are the orbs that you see on the adjustment card, and the fact that they return later in the episode pretty much proves it. In my opinion, it's pretty much proven. So I think that that Sylvie does represent Lady Judgment or Tamas or Lady Justice, all the different names for her. I'm going to read a little bit of what is said by the great beast himself, Crowley, about this card, because this is crux to the whole weave of this episode. Okay, so reading here from Crowley's writing, he says, this card in the old pack was called Justice. This word has none but a purely human and therefore relative sense. So it is not to be considered as one of the facts of nature. Nature is not just, according to any theological or ethical idea, but nature is exact. This card represents the sign of Libra ruled by Venus. In it, Saturn is exalted, Kronos. The equilibrium of all things is hereby symbolized. It is the final adjustment in the formula of tetragrammaton, when the daughter, redeemed by her marriage with the son, is thereby set up on the throne of the mother. Thus, finally, she awakens the eld of the Allfather. And the greatest symbolism of all, however, the symbolism beyond all planetary and zodiacal considerations, this card is the feminine complement of the Fool. It's got the Lamed on it, the Hebrew letter Lamed, which signifies both teaching and learning. And Lamed, according to the Hebrew scholars, is an acronym of Lev, Mevin, Da'at, which is a heart that understands wisdom. More to continue Crowley's statements about this. More than this, she is the complete formula of the dyad. The word all is the title of the book of the law, whose number is 31, the most secret of the numerical keys of that book. And as you see, when she's peeping on the intruders, which they actually re-show this shot, they re-show this is from the previous episode, but when they're at the Rocks Cart grocery store or mega store, whatever, the screen that she's watching them through is number 31, and you see the 31 very clearly. So nice. they went back and gave us a rehash of this shot so we would see the 31 again. I feel like,
Right.
they're telling us something.
And also that the XY axis grid system underneath, that actually comports to the lambdoma that Crowley suggested was implicit to this card as well. It's basically a grid system of calculation. It's a form of calculating using an XY diamond shape, which is the diamond shape of the card itself.
Yeah, it's what you would call a matrix.
Yes.
The lambdoma
Yes.
is a mathematical matrix.
Nice. And can you zoom into the left shoulder of the character on the card? You're going to see a flaw, what looks like a break or a mistake. Do you see that off of her shoulder on her left side is like a imperfect image or some sort of I don't know, looks like a unintended shape there. You see it? That the diamond shape
My left or her left?
on
Like
her left.
this side?
Yep. There's just something about, yeah, and the fact that that dark green diamond, to me, it just looks like a break or yeah, like a flaw or a imperfection, which reminds me of her horns. The fact that she has her horns on one side are just nice and even, and then on one side it's broken off. And right here, there's like some strange imperfection hiding out on the one corner.
Yeah, and you see in the scales you have the alpha and the omega, and then the sword
Yes.
in between is the eye. And as Dylan pointed out in the chat, great commentary, Dylan. Don't forget that Jesus admits to being Yao, which is IAO or iota alpha omega. I am the alpha and omega. And Yao is on the coins of Abraxas or Nephis, who are serpents or serpentine. So there's your serpent named Eve.
And that is that specific sword that this card is holding is the exact same sword in the same deck that is the Ace of Swords. And so as we are going into the fall right now, the swords become the element, the wind, the aspect of wind.
The Ace of Swords is the infamous Ace of Spades, which is representative of, and in many senses, it's like death. Usually the ace cards are something good, but the Ace of Spades or the Ace of Swords could be a death divination as well. Now, it's interesting that you bring up the lambdoma, which is like a matrix, mathematical matrix. And if you look in the patterning behind the card, you do see that kind of like perfect grid system with just a slight blemish that you pointed out that I find really interesting, that there's an imbalance there towards the right side or the alpha side. Probably intentional. But Crowley says about this character, who the complete formula of the dyad, the feminine component of the fool, that the most secret of secrets is that she represents manifestation, which may always be canceled out by equilibration of opposites. That's what he says. Manifestation, which may always be canceled out by equilibration of opposites. So the major theme of this episode, and maybe the whole show at large, is how Loki and Sylvie, the anima and animus, the yin and the yang, masculine and feminine, being together in equilibrium threatens to end the sacred timeline, which is all of manifest reality, but also kind of a controlled illusion, essentially. From the Book of Thoth, again, Crowley says, balance against each other its exact opposite, for the marriage of these is the annihilation of illusion. The woman satisfied, from the cloak of this vivid wantonness of her dancing wings issue her hands. They hold the hilt of the phallic sword of the magician. She holds the blade between her thighs. This again is a hieroglyph of love is the law, love under will. Every form of energy must be directed, must be applied with integrity to the full satisfaction of its destiny. So we'll keep this in mind, because essentially what we're getting from Crowley is that the purpose, or the satisfaction of the alchemical marriage is the canceling out of manifestation, which is being considered illusion, the annihilation of illusion, destruction of Maya. And that's the question I want us to be asking as we go through this is, does bringing together the masculine and feminine principles in equilibrium destroy everything, or does it create everything? Because to me, this sounds like total lie. It just sounds like Crowley's lying. I don't know how else to put it. Like, it's just not how it works in anything that I've ever observed. That's not true. So going forward, go ahead.
Can you go back to the one picture before? Yeah. So right there is her rig for the episode where she opened up all the different portals. Yeah. That rig is the shape of the Ara Altair constellation. Again, another ding for Ara Altair. The fact that it's off to this kiltered shape, it's going to keep coming up. It comes up a million other times in other episodes going forward. But I want to give Ara Altair a shout out when it comes up, and also the golden doorway that they keep walking in and out of is totally the shape of this adjustment card. The big monolithic gold shape is the shape of the card, and it's almost the same color too. It's a little more warm yellow, but it is totally. And this diamond that the adjustment card is representing is called the Great Diamond Asterism, and it is in Virgo. It's perfectly in Virgo. In its corners, it has 4 corners. One is Arcturus, one is Spica, one is the nose of Leo, and then the other one is some other obscure star. But it makes a nice diamond shape that is almost a perfect fit for this diamond here on this card. But also, it has like the right angle of all right angles, Coma Berenices. The Coma Berenices constellation, which is Samson's hair when he gets his hair cut off. But this Coma Berenices is the right angle of all right angles. And the diamond is basically from Arcturus down to Spica to the cat's nose, if you believe that. And then up here to somewhere around Canis Venatici. Somewhere up here, there's the top of the Great Diamond Asterism. So yeah, we are definitely going into the fall, coming out of the last of the summer sky.
I like the comments from MS in the chat that maybe we're talking about the destruction of illusion mentally. And that does kind of work mentally. You can cancel out persistent, illusory or limiting thoughts with their opposite. You definitely can. Yes. And everything being mental and the hermetic principle of that. I can jive with that. And I think people miss the point, and yeah, the logic fan. For mystics always talk about things in the abstract. For a lot of them, actuality or existence is the enemy. Yeah. And that's that's what I think we're up against in the world right now, is the factions that see reality itself as somehow not real and to be rebelled against or destroyed or jailbreak the construct, as it were, all of that. But going back to the plot, progressing forward in the plot, she finds out that magic does not work at the TVA. Her left hand, she's looking at her left hand, her left horn is broken, her left side symbolically is broken, her feminine side. But she can take the magic phallic stick. And she does her stick karate, beats the dudes up. I really like this guy's face. The extras really put in, they went the extra mile with their anguish and their expressions as they're getting beat up.
He looks a little like Homie Romy if Homie Romy was playing the role.
I was thinking it was like Kali or something. He's being destroyed after all.
Yeah, and they make the worst noise. When they die, they're all...
Yeah. Loki follows her through the time portal. This, to me, is reminiscent of how in the mythology of Tamas, Ishtar / Inanna and Tamas follow each other into the underworld, as in one goes in to retrieve the other, but then the other comes out when they go in, and they're in this constant cycle, the summer and the winter, essentially.
Yes. It makes me think of the that Corona Borealis and the Corona Australis. The fact that I'm convinced that there are literally two entryways going through the fall, and they go in one and come out the other. But another thing about that scene is it's the locker room. They're going into the locker room. And the last time we were in this location was when B-15 came in the room and took the swords, the knives away from Loki. Owen Wilson is like, he's like, oh, here you go, just in case. And he's like, all right. And then B-15 comes walking. She's like, I don't think so. She snatches the knives away. She puts them in her locker instead. Well, I didn't realize until this scene to look back at that scene and think about the fact that they're doing co-ed lockers. B-15 should not be in the same locker room. They slipped that past our radar, right? And then here in at this aspect, he's chasing his own animus through a locker room. And so there's something really psychologically profound about that. He is committed. He's now committed to pursue his own animus. And the first thing that he's brought through is into the locker room where he got bullied before. Last time somebody tried to give him some manpower between two men, and some woman comes up and snatches the manpower out from his hands. Like the moment of disempowerment happened in the locker room. And so here he is retracing his own trauma, his own steps. And what does he do? He looks back, he sees that locker. He's like, I'm going to steal that shit. And he goes and he gets his swords back. So there is kind of a remanning up that goes on right here, but it's not explicit. It's really very subtly going on behind the scenes. You got to be looking to see it.
Yeah, thank you that's a better explanation of, I never really thought of it as locker room politics, but it definitely was. B-15 is another masculine female in this series. I mean, she's beefier than all the dudes that she's standing around in that scene where she takes she castrates him symbolically.
Dude, the word B-15 is basically beef. B and then F.
Beef.
Beef.
She's a beefy teen. Locker room teenagers. So I wanted to talk about the Ishtar or Inanna, also called Geshtinanna, which to me, Geshtinanna, that's basically got Ganesh in the name, it's there. Ganesh, Janus, the doors of the year, particularly that fits, in my opinion, symbolically because the Tamas and Inanna marriage date was the marker of the end of the old year, the beginning of the new, which would be like roughly the end of March and the beginning of April for us, but that would have been where the year ended and began back then, allegedly. And you see the horns that she's got here, Ishtar, goddess of love, war, and fertility. That makes her identical to Aphrodite, who has all those same qualities. And here's another verse from the book of Lamentations. He hath cut off in his fierce anger all the horn of Israel. He hath drawn back his right hand from before the enemy, and he burned against Jacob like a flaming fire, which devoureth round about. Especially that, the flaming fire devoureth round about, that's very much what's going to be going on later in this episode. But cut off the horn of Israel. We have a cut off horn here on Sophie, shown very clearly throughout this episode. And here's a perfect example where you wouldn't even know, if you didn't have the context of horn referring to the cornucopia, then you would probably be confused reading this Bible verse, like most Bible verses would be if you didn't have the symbolism. And remember the strength card. There's something we got to keep in mind, in all of this, of the switch between the strength card and the justice card that Crowley did, which I still don't fully understand why that switch was done. Honestly, it's a weird thing, but that's the strength card or the lust card for Crowley is the Virgo character, the Queen of Heaven, taming the lion, and here's Ishtar standing on the lion.
Well, I got something on that. For one, you read some of it in his from his own words about how justice does not exist in nature. And I'm inclined to kind of agree with him that I think another thing that I interpret from the removal of justice from his deck is that the 11th Aristotelian virtue was not originally justice. Originally, the final virtue was righteous indignation. And that is to say that Aristotle, for many years, for many cultures, before somebody got their hands on it, was telling full-grown adults, sometimes you got to get fucking righteously pissed off. Sometimes that's the right fucking answer. And somewhere between Aristotle and us, they're like, nah, you can't be telling people it's okay to get pissed off. You just can't tell people that it's okay to get pissed. So what they did was they removed righteous indignation and they put justice in its place. And the thing is, justice is just an industry. It's just, I call it a Salt Lick shooting gallery. It's not, it's art. It's just art. It's really not scientific whatsoever. So I'm kind of with Crowley on pulling justice out of the, that's a dangerous illusion. It's a false hope. It's man's pride. It's drama. It's drama. And it's pharmakia. It's also pharmakia, believing that you can put your sins or your transgressions into a surrogate persona. And the surrogate persona will go into the gladiator for you and come back. And whatever happens is the will of the gods. It's just superstition and drama. So I'm kind of with him, but adjustment.
Maybe we'd be in a better position to consider that position more along the concept of karma.
Yeah,
because karma does seem to exist in nature.
Yes, and there is the Wheel of Fortune card is right next to it. The wheel comes into play very proximally.
Yeah.
But I think of the adjustment card as the Overton window, and what people will adjust their sense of what's right and what's wrong in this world. And isn't it fascinating that Crowley, the most wicked man alive, he came as a living example to move our sense of what is evil so far along that now you and I can make butt jokes and sodomizing jokes because Aleister Crowley cleared the socially acceptable public arena. So now we can make butt jokes and talk about weird how psychosexual sports are. And we owe Crowley for that because Crowley just threw the gauge of what's socially acceptable so far. And every once in a while we have these characters like Marquis de Sade Marquis de Sade comes on the scene, and now like the comics the comics who make the mail, like the newspaper that depict politicians doing things. After Marquis de Sade, the comic strips became like insanely lewd. And like everybody's walking around with Priapus boners in the newspaper. And so what is socially acceptable gets kind of thrown and adjusted periodically. And that's what I think about now. When I see the adjustment card, I think Overton window. This is the discernment of the Overton window and what's considered socially acceptable. Oh, and this lambdoma metric, this matrix measurement, this XY axis thing, at the very top of it is balanced an infinity symbol, a sideways analemma. And sure enough, he changed that card to be card number 8. The lambdoma is a lemniscato, a sideways 8, and it's at the top of that metrics.
And did you catch that the lemniscate shows up late in this episode as well? The moment when they're finally crossing the threshold into like, the hopeless side of the gates of judgment. Then that exact moment that they cross the analemma, that symbol shows up. Well, we'll look at that later in the stream when we get to that point. It definitely is there.
Oh yeah. Fire.
So Loki, he gets his knives. Me and Jen were thinking about like what it means to dual wield, to have 2 weapon fighting. There's a type of Roman gladiator that was called the Demacarius, something like that. The name is basically the Greek word, or according to the mainstream etymology anyway, Makari, which is dual or 2, and ma, which is justice, essentially. It's another name for the Athena or justice characters, ma. And then kari, which is hands, but also, takes us into the realm of Charon, the ferryman. Just some fun little etymology. Demicarius. Loki is a Demicarius. And we see in the hallway all of the people who've been killed by variants. Never forget when this was coming out was when people were getting all kinds of pumped up about like the next variant is going to kill grandma, the next variant is going to kill everybody, variants, and here's this show about variants, and they're killing government officials apparently. Now they have this fight scene where Loki and Sylvie they're trying to figure each other out. They're in a bit of a scuffle. There's very much this idea of stalemate going on throughout this episode. And I think that's one of the ways to interpret what Crowley was talking about with the 2 forces in equilibrium that ends manifestation. Because you have this anima animus. They're in a type of equilibrium, or the scales are balanced. One can't beat the other. And neither one can really proceed in their path either while they're in this stalemate. Another thing that Jennifer caught, though, is you see this clock. There's 3 clocks on this mural, but there's only one that they show repeatedly. In a lot of the shots, you can only see this one that I've circled. And then in the end credits, there's a very prominent projector that's shown, hollow projector 35. And on this clock is the time 11:35. So I was like, you know what? Let's just see. Is there any reason why we should be thinking about 35? Turns out that there is a great reason to think about the number 35. In the biblical gematria, the Hebrew, 35 is Gimel Bet Lamed, GBL, which essentially means to turn or to plate, as in like twist together or combine, to be bound or limit, as in to set a boundary. It can also refer to mountains or hills or high places, essentially. So first of all, 11:35, that's the 11, and then 3 plus 5 is 8. So there's your justice card and strength card, 11 to 8 being adjusted. 8 to 11, 11 to 8. That's all in the mix. And I'm going to just move forward, but we're going to keep GBL in mind here. You have, well, also, if you do the BV switch, you got gavel out of GBL. There's that, gavel, as in the judge's hammer. And this is the TVA we're talking about, and they're the time gods, the time judges. But here, since we're talking about boundaries with 35, great time to bring up Terminus, or Termes, aka Hermes, a psychopomp here, or a boundary marker, essentially. In Etruscan religion, Termes, or terms, is the equivalent of the Roman Mercury and the Greek Hermes, both gods of trade, and he's the messenger god between people and the gods. You know, same exact deal, same attributes. Caduceus, the winged helmet, the winged sandals, all of that jazz. We've also got the archaic Herm, which are these posts that have the god Hermes' head on them, and also often a phallus, like think Priapus. You've also got what the scholars call Terminus, which is another god, a god of boundaries. But it's like they just completely ignore, conceal, or miss the point entirely that, hey, wait, Terminus, but there's also Hermes on these exact same posts marking terminus points, boundaries. So is it really a different god named Terminus, or is it terms of the Etruscans is Hermes, is the god of boundaries? And the god of boundaries and containers, wait, that's Kronos, I thought. That's a Saturn thing. So here it all goes, collapsing into itself and becoming one thing. Even a lot of these Herm statues are a cross. They have like the cross symbolism going on. There's your savior on a cross all over the place. So anyway, getting into the back to the word GBL, or the 35. It occurred slightly more than 200 times in the Old Testament. It may denote, sometimes it denotes the banks of a stream, as in a river, as it does in the book of Numbers. It can be the outer walls of a temple, the subsidiary territory of a city, but usually is described as the boundaries of a people. And possibly, though, the most interesting derivative of this word GBL, Gebel, is the word Bible. And that's straight from the mainstream scholarly Hebrew analysis. And what is a Bible, or Biblos? It's a law book, which is the boundaries of behavior. And there's your justice card again, with the law. Also, if you do the C to B switch, your CBL is Kabbalah. It's all there. There's a lot going on here.
Man, that is really good. It definitely makes me think of Angel Gabriel. Angel Gabriel,
yeah. Who's a messenger of the gods.
Yeah, totally. And was very likely responsible for, giving the name of the man, the Most High, Rastafari. No, but also there's a sacred text, an alchemical text that has a very similar name. It's like I'll see if I can dig it up here in a second, but it's basically a alchemical book with a name that is basically Jabir. And it has many ciphers. It's very numerically oriented. And I've often joked with Juan. I actually told him, I said, if Jesus was a homunculus, then this Jabiri book is the book that the recipe came out of.
Dylan also might be right about GBL, JPL. Because G's and J's can switch. Both can make the J sound. P's and B's also switch. GPL, JPL.
Yeah. Parsons Laboratory.
Yeah, who worked with Crowley.
Okay.
That's in there.
All right, before we go too far from that, in the last episode, in the scene where they're in the library, they're going. So here we're still in Libra. We're still in the library. We're still in the domain of the books and the old written stories. They're going back to access all of those disasters throughout history. And I learned this by reading, researching the film and some of the director's comments on the director's own decisions on the motif of the film. Buddy, she says that they chose the music in the library to fit exactly the music that they were playing in the movie Seven. Do you remember Seven?
Which is
With
also about them tracking down a killer, right? And related to like the seven
totally,
deadly sins. I remember the movie. I don't think I ever saw it all the way through, but I see a
yes,
lot of thematic similarities. And then that whole episode, the previous episode, was all about, well, one of the major themes was laying the groundwork about how Mobius, that character, represents the seven.
exactly. Which yes, which is totally going to unpack a million different ways now, because his personality type being a strong seven. Um, but I went back and I watched the full scene that it overlaps, like a one-to-one correspondence to them doing their research in the library, and it's Freeman. Uh, oh, Freeman. What's his first name?
Morgan.
Morgan
Morgan
Freeman.
Freeman.
Thank you. He's doing the research and he pulls Dante's Inferno, which I've done some research on that in the 9 levels of the Inferno with the 9 levels of the Enneagram. But he's also pulling Canterbury's Tale. And in Canterbury's Tale, he specifically, I like peeped his notes and I snatched a screenshot of his notes. He's specifically drawing on the the part of the story called the Parson's Tale. And the Parson's Tale from Canterbury's Tale, it's like one of the many chapters, is the part where they list the 7 deadly sins and the 7 remedial virtues that will cure the 7 deadly sins. And so I just wanted to mention that
It's
as
also
the JPL.
the Parson's Tale is also the terminus or the terminal point of the Canterbury Tales. It's the final tale in the frame story.
That's it. That's what's up. Yep,
Just
totally.
we had to study.
So
We had to study that shit. I was an English major, so I did a lot of Brit Lit courses.
nice. Nice, dude. That's awesome. So it's so fascinating to me because Chance, um, here we are studying Loki, going down really obscure associations. I mean, it doesn't get much more thin branch of speculative association to get to the end of the scene with Morgan Freeman and find out that it's all about the 7 deadly sins again. And just last week, you pulled out the Economist magazine. And on the cover of the Economist magazine was the 7 deadly sins, giving the map, the rough map to hell. Very, very
Yeah, the
fascinating.
roadmap to hell. Oh yeah, that was in episode 1 of this, wasn't it?
Right, right. Yeah. So all of this is just blowing my mind because the Enneagram is my map to both through the heavenly realms and through the infernal, you know, obstacles of existence. So yeah, very fun to find the 7 deadly sins popping off yet again.
I affirm that. I gotta mention this comment from Mick again in the chat about GBL. This one got right past me. This is why I would love the chat, you guys. Thank you for the weaves. This is some, because this feels really relevant. GBL is a drug that when you take 1.2 milliliters of it, you get high for an hour, and then your body processes it and turns it into GHB, and you get high again. I remember hearing about that one. That's like a rave drug, right? And he says 1.2 milliliters is the boundary, and if you take more than that, you get what I've termed possessed high. It's scary to watch. And get this, the GBL as a drug is called gamma booty rolectone. Gamma booty. Gamma booty. We did a lot about Loki being a gamma at the beginning of the series and, changing.
Perfect.
So we'll continue on, though. I wanted to point out with this shot how these are the Gemini twins, right? And we talked about GBL could also mean like a hill or a high place or a mountain. The Gemini constellation to the Sumerians, Babylonians, Akkadians, the Mesopotamian cultures was twin mountains, actually. And mountains are the boundaries between people. So we see there a clear connection to the Hermes Gemini character figure and the idea of boundaries going back really far. And the whole scene of them fighting and being in their stalemate is interrupted by Renslayer showing up, and she's like, I'm just going to kill you both. I don't care if one of you kills the other. I'm getting rid of you both either way. Loki, quick thinking, activates the tempad, and they fall through the trapdoor again. So here's another the fall moment, which is the theme of this episode. Constantly in the fall. And
oh, look, we get a picture of the timekeepers on the sides there. Dude, I'm loving the one with the gigantic mustache. He's looking a little like Nietzsche. Kind of got the walrus mustache going over there.
I can't wait. I think that's next episode that we get to see the timekeepers.
I think so.
Man, We'll have fun with that. I'm looking forward to it. Haven't rewatched those episodes till I get to them to analyze them for this. It's been a lot of fun. I'm really grateful for the people that are on this ride with us too. The people that they see it, it's about comics or whatever, and they don't tune in, but they normally would watch my streams. They're missing out. Like, this is the fun stuff, man. So they fall through the trapdoor, and now as they're scrambling to fight for the tempad, they realize that it's out of juice. You're out of juice. Battery's dead. Whoa, what's juice or use? It's from the Sanskrit you or Jew to join. So use is Latin. That's a law or a system of law. So, I can't help it. I'm seeing the lawgiver, law, justice card pop up here again, right, with use. And not to mention, we talked about Nexus events last previous episode or two ago, how Nexus events are what the TVA is trying to stop or whatnot. And it's a really good example of how the L and the R can swap, but also the N can swap with R's. So in Latin, ligare is to bind. Religare is to rebind or to retie, to bind or to hold fast. That's where the word religion comes from. But ligare is like legislation. It's that lig or leg, that's of the idea of legislation. Lig is lex, lex, lig. C switches with G, but C can also become the X sound. You see all these interchanges going on. So lex and lig are, and they're all right there. You see this. And then lex and rex, that's who's giving the laws, is the king. Rex is king. But nex, as in nexus or nectare, is another word, nectare in Latin, meaning to hold fast, to tie, to bind. So when we see the word nexus, we should be thinking law. We should be thinking religare, religion. In all of this, ligare and religare, showing you how the law is the religion. And regardless of if you think you've separated church and state, if you believe that there's a mystical thing called a government that has laws, that Santa Claus is watching you to see if you've been naughty or nice, all of that, you are in a religion. And that's okay. It's okay. If we want to have a binding contract for society of what thou shalt and thou shalt not do, all good. That's fine. But don't be under any illusions about what it is. It's 100% a religion. So this just tickles me a lot. And keep in mind, Nex and Rex and Lex, all basically referring to the same thing. That you have in and R and L, very interchangeable. Particularly the R and the in are what swap, not the in and the L. But the L can swap to an R, so it all gets it all gets very flexible, flexible. Now this one's gonna, Gabe, you're really gonna like this one. All right, we're looking at first statue is Lady Justice blindfolded, holding the balance and a sword. But where do you find this? Hong Kong. This is in Hong Kong. This is worldwide,
Nice.
baby. In the middle, you got Tish or TK, which is also known as Fortuna. That's Lady Luck. Then on the right, you have her again, Fortuna, Lady Luck. But do you see the blindfold that she's got there? That's because this is all the same being. It's all the same character. They divide her up and say it's different, different gods, different goddesses. But like I said at the beginning, it's actually all the same one that has different epithets and names. So when we're talking about justice, Tice, justice, it's just Tike, just Tish. That's her. It's Lady Luck, Lady Fortune. And interestingly enough, in terms of the twin symbolism, Lady Justice often appears as a pair with another goddess named Prudentia. Prudentia means forethought. It's Prometheus and Epimetheus, the female version of Prometheus and Epimetheus, Tish and Prudentia.
That's interesting. I think
what is Prometheus is forethought, right?
Yeah.
And Epimetheus is afterthought.
Yeah.
And justice comes after the fact, it's an afterthought.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's great. That's really great. I love that.
Yeah.
It's kind of like yet another Janus where they're, looking in opposite directions, covering each other's bases. You could kind of say, you watch my six, I'll watch yours.
Yes. Thank you.
Yep.
You get it. It's there.
The anode cathode. They almost they imply each other. That's kind of it. It's like so many times, like when you hear something that is 20 degrees, you should also be thinking of something that is 160 degrees to make it a complete 180. Or you should be thinking of something that is 340 degrees, so it can be a 360 complete. And I love that. That's really cool. That's really cool that you got that. Justice is just Tish. Just Tish. That's beautiful.
Do you see the orbs in here too?
Yes.
On both of these images, those orbs from the adjustment card.
Yeah. The one thing about Fortuna is she is said to be, if you're not going to go by the rules of the city, then you're going to need her good graces to go try your luck in the wilderness. And so there's like a dividing line, a separating of the wheat from the chaff, so to say, or
you're getting ahead of us again, separating the wheat and the chaff. You see this right here? You see what she's holding? That, in my opinion, is a fan. But it's also the oar of a boat. We'll explain why it's both later, but that's a fan, which is used in the process of separating the wheat from the chaff, a fan. And also, here's the horn. She's holding the horn of plenty, the cornucopia, the single horn.
Yes.
And now, so is this Fortuna. I believe that's what that's supposed to be.
Nice. So these horns, on my read, of course, they are in the springtime is when the spring, they blow the shofar. It's the beginning of the year, but also this horn is on the other side of the zodiac, over with Arcturus. Arcturus is sometimes called the Great Horn, and it is a shofar in its own right, but not so much of the springtime solar abundance coming up into fulfillment. It's actually marking more of a lunar initiation. The great horn is a marcation of the lunar new year over in Boötes. So while the sun is coming up in the spring uh, equinox, the moon is going to fulfill itself across the sky on the other side of the zodiac under the great horn that is the Arcturus constellation. And that begins the lunar calendar. So yeah, I'm totally just basically see both of the equinoxes marcated by the horn in particular.
Makes sense. There's 2 horns on the head.
Right. And then the other hand is the staff, which would be more of the solstices. So the horn would be the equinox, staff would be the solstice.
And you remember lesbian Jesus from the beginning of the stream?
Yeah.
Here's Dike or Dyke, another goddess of justice in the spirit of moral order and fair judgment. But hey, I'm pretty sure I don't think we're looking at DK. I think we're looking at TK, TK, however you pronounce that.
Right.
T's and D's switch. Yet somehow the mainstream scholars and mythologists just miss that. And they're like, no, this DK is different than TK. They're not the same. It's the same. Uh-huh. It's the same. Just holding the scales. Give me a break. Come on. So here's a great example. Another god made up by the misunderstanding of letter swaps. There you go. But hey, what can you do? We're onto it, and you guys listening are onto it. You'll know what you see. You won't be confused by the mess of zillions of gods and goddesses. You'll realize, oh, it's all one system. It's all the same thing. Very helpful. Very, very helpful. But I can't help but wonder if, like, is that where we get the lesbian being called a dyke? I don't know, because aren't they all oftentimes riled up at least ostensibly by the injustices of men towards women, so they go that way? That's my take on it. Yeah. That's what I'm reading into this.
Yeah.
Not to mention, hey, isn't that Astarte? I don't know. You see the lettering behind her.
Oh yeah, totally. Yep.
So back to the juice, which, by the way, Mick in the chat says that the juice is another name of that GBL drug, juice. That's funny.
Oh damn.
Yeah, these are the syncs that just manifest when you look at this stuff. It's like the winks are constant. I've got one coming up that really threw me for a loop that I wasn't expecting to stumble into. But back to the book of Lamentations. Remember this verse. The Lord hath trodden underfoot all my mighty men in the midst of me. He hath called an assembly against me to crush my young men. The Lord hath trodden the virgin, the daughter of Judah, as in a winepress. Well, right before Libra in Virgo season, the grapes are harvested in Virgo season and crushed in Libra, and that makes the wine. But when did the grapes ripen? During the Leo season, when the sun is in its fury. And that's why the wine, symbol of Bacchus, creates that divine madness of like the Bacchian rites. They're drinking the wine that contains the fury of the Leo season. So this whole thing about like crushing the wine or crushing underfoot, trodden the virgin underfoot. We're talking about that point in Libra where the grapes that were harvested, they're untouched grapes, they're virgin grapes, for extra virgin olive oil, harvested in that season. Mm-hmm. Now, the next shot, the 2 Lokis get fighting again. They're in their stalemate. And he throws her into a barrel. Just like a barrel that you crush the grapes in.
Just like Diogenes.
Not to mention it's all this purple color grading, purple being a color associated with the grapes. This is the wine
Nice.
press, though. She gets thrown into the wine
Yeah,
press.
but
And tell us
and
what
so
your
also,
reference to Diogenes, what are you alluding to there?
yeah, Diogenes, he lives in a wine barrel with a bunch of dogs. He's the cynic. He's the philosopher cynic, and he's said to go around naked, surrounded by the dogs, living in this wine barrel, and he's got a lantern. He's the original hermit card. He's basically the original hermit card. Uh, the wine barrel that he lives in is the Crator constellation. The Crator constellation is a wine cup, because, as Chance was elucidating, this is the season for, cheers. Um, but the dogs of Diogenes hanging out around his barrel, that's Canis Venatici, right there next to the Crator constellation. So
Hmm.
all of the ingredients of these philosophers, they've been deified as well into the constellations.
Oh, yeah. The crater is the wine vessel. Vinatici, kind of reminiscent of the word vinter, which is a winemaker.
Isn't it? Isn't it? Great call.
And a vin, switch the V to a B. Vin is a bin, that you might might be keeping it in a bin. Could all be there. Language is one big interconnected symbolic story time. Super fun.
And Canis Venatici is an anagram for Vatican science.
Hey.
And it's a loose anagram. It's not perfect. I had to be playful with the word science. But we know that they are masters of the vat. The vat being, the spirits that they need for their rituals. So yeah, very interesting. The Vatican science, and they were the they
Can't
made all
forget the
the ale.
greatest vinter of all is Jesus turning water into wine.
That's it. That's totally their magic. Totally.
And Noah, who taught the people the art of making wine, because Noah is Bacchus, same as the Cox in the Mexican indigenous religion, or I don't know, like I can't remember off the top of my head, like Potlotl or some crazy word, but they had a version of Noah. He's the flood hero, gets off the boat, teaches his people winemaking. One of his sons sees him naked. Everything, the whole bit, like it's exactly the same.
Wow, fucking Cox.
So, Sophie, they're fighting, right? And now Loki can use his magic, so he's teleporting around, he's doing illusions, and she says, "You're fully a magician, then, huh?" And so, why don't we just look at the magician or the magus card? This is one of the magi card of the three that are in the Thoth Tarot. But I feel like he keeps doing this pose where he's holding the daggers down like that. And it really reminds me of the pose of the Magus card in this deck. Even with the rapier that it's got. Here's the caduceus. This is evidently, definitely Mercury. And according to the color associations that the Thoth deck explains in its, guidebook, the color related to this and Mercury would be purple. And, this is also the first time we really see Loki do much magic. Wanted to also point out that the alternate name of the magician is the juggler in the tarot. Doing tricks. Next,
Nice.
their fighting is interrupted by this miniature meteor that pierces the ceiling and comes through. So again, from the Book of Lamentations, verse 3, he hath cut off, I think this is chapter 2, or book 2, verse 3, Lamentations. He hath cut off in his fierce anger all the horn of Israel. He hath drawn back his right hand from before the enemy, and he burned against Jacob like a flaming fire, which devoureth round about. So now we got the fall, fire falling from above, the sun going down, the fire fall, right? And we leave this shot of them, in their stalemate. And here we got, the title, Lamentis 1. So to me, that reads Book of Lamentations, Book 1. Go read that. It's not a long read, honestly. And then as we zoom up, we see the year is 2077. And here's a big moon hanging in the sky. Although they kind of flip it and they say that that's a planet, but what they're on is a moon. But hey, apples and oranges is it's the same thing. You know, if it's hanging in the sky above you, it's the moon. This also makes me think of Cyberpunk 2077. One of these days, Gabe, you got to look at the Cyberpunk 2077 video games tarot cards. It's like the major arcana made into the story of transhumanism, and it's intense. I covered it long ago.
I remember.
But
Yeah, I remember some of your work on that a while back. Vaguely, I didn't know that it was specifically 2077 on that deck.
that's the year that the game takes place in. Yeah, Cyberpunk 2077. I've been revisiting that game as they just put out a big 2.0 update. Totally added a bunch of stuff, changed a bunch of stuff. It's an interesting one, man. I actually kind of think that I think they're good guys, but it's hardcore. I think most of the intent behind that game is actually to like, as properly illustrate the abject hell of transhumanism as possible, even giving you everything that they can that would be considered flashy or cool, but juxtaposed with the truly horrific connotations of such an artificial, you know, human fall. And they do a good job of that. I actually like it a lot. And it is just chock full of occult stuff.
Yeah. Well, so this image for me brought forward the star card from the Thoth deck majorly. Even though it's called the star card, it is dominated by a massive moon. And the star card is correspondent to Aquarius. But what is really
even got the purple color grading to it too.
It's the same color. It's also exaggerated moon. But it also, if it's in Aquarius, it's going to be at the foot of the Uranus River. And this is going to be where all the runoff at the bottom of the river. This will be like the delta of the Uranus. But again, with that, the Fornax constellation is going to be on my mind throughout the rest of these scenes because it is like a conflagration that's happening. Is these worlds are colliding, and the essence of the characters are coming to terms with each other. Yes, nice.
Let's put it right in there.
Isn't that so correspondent? And so
100%. I mean, the colors are exact. It's the letter Hey is the letter on the star card for the Thoth Tarot, and that letter in Hebrew is behold, here it is. Something disturbing.
Yeah, buddy.
And the shot pans up and it's like, behold, be disturbed. Like it's everything about the star card.
Yes. So there are quite a few weaves. Like right away when I see this moon and it brings in the star card in my mind, 1,000 million things come to mind all at once. But one of the most important ones is going to be the Fornax constellation, but also everybody remembers the China weather balloons. This is the China weather balloon. Her arms outstretched across are in the exact shape of the weather balloon that had everybody in a tizzy. And that weather balloon traced the exact course of the eclipse, of the Great American Eclipse. And then they popped it off the coast of South Carolina. It went exactly along the course of the Great American Eclipse with the 7 Salems and all that. So this card has been charged already with veneration and fear and speculation and what it's woozy, it's woozy, it's a fugazi, it's fairy dust. What is it? And sure enough, here in this film, they're bringing out its echoes. Its emanations are coming out in the film again, and it has to do with the sky is falling. global warming, the end of all things. But I want to point out the cup. She's holding the cup, the Krator constellation. She's got one up above and one down below. And then one more thing, she's going to be representing the swan, the Cygnus constellation. Notice her hair makes a sine wave. The Cygnus of the sine wave is the wave of her hair. She's going to be representing Pegasus, which is the vehicle of the hero that lets him escape. But she's also the augur, the reader of auguries. February 2nd with Groundhog's Day is kind of intrinsic to her location. But then I'm seeing, you know what an auger looks like, right? It's a spiraling screw shape.
It's like a drill
It's
thing.
a drill. And look at the shape of her hair. Her hair is literally the shape of an auger or a drill or an Archimedean
and
screw.
what do they call that? Where it's like twining around itself. That
Yeah.
What is like braiding in a sense, twisting together a plate, or plait, plating. That is one of the meanings of the GBL in Hebrew, the 35, Gibil. It's that twisting that's twisting around her.
Wow. So
the helixing, if you will.
One thing that I noticed in this episode, nice, yeah. One thing about this episode, just a side note. I don't know if it'll come up or mean anything, but we're actually not seeing any of Mobius. It's like they can only pay so many actors to be in so many episodes. So they're like, okay, well, we're not going to pay Mobius for this episode. So while I just noticed an absence of him.
That's probably why.
Yeah, a budget. I'm mentioning that he is absent, but I think sometimes there's something alchemical about the character who's absent. I don't want to speculate too much, but the lack of Mobius, I don't know. I'm just making a note of it. But then I want to mention the drinks. In the beginning, the two girls had the two tiki drinks, right?
Mai Tais.
This star card she has two cups, one in each hand. One is pouring out. Well, they're both pouring out, really. But again, with the two drinks or the two cups, both with the Mai Tais. But then here in a second, we're going to have the champagne, again with two cups.
I had to really think about the number 77. That seems like that's got significance. And I'm not sure about this, Weave. I'm not entirely sure, but I did come across shout out to Corey Daniel, the Phoenix Enigma. He was claiming that the gematria value of ichthys, which is the fish word, and also that six-spoked wheel, the Jesus later became the Jesus fish. It's a Bacchus symbol, essentially, Buddha symbol, that the gematria value of that is 77, like the powers of notation of those letters in Greek. 77 is 2/3 of 777. 2/3 is 0.666. Wait. Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah. You can go check out the Phoenix Enigma, Corey Daniel, phoenixenigma.com. There's an article about 77. It's all over the map. There's tons of stuff. Particularly interesting is Flight 77 that allegedly hit the Pentagon. Tons of stuff, though. I've heard it said that 77 in Thelema, the so-called satanic cult system that Crowley set up, that 77 had to do with like sorcery and sex magic. I don't know. I'm not making any claims. I don't really have receipts. It was too much for me, honestly.
Yeah.
To try to get into all the possible meanings that revolve around 77, but there's a lot. Of note is Jacob Boehm says that 77 is the total number of divine revelation thanks to the word made flesh. I don't know what that exactly is supposed to mean. There's a lot to it, though.
Well, a couple of things that stick out for me is Lady Frida Harris, the artist who made this Thoth deck in particular, she was born in 1877. She said that the deck would take about 100 years before people could understand what it meant. And I have come to understand its meaning best through the Star Wars trilogies. Uh, and that came out in 1977.
Ah,
And so I find it very fascinating that she has that sacred holiday or that sacred birthday, and it was 100 years after her birthday that the Star Wars started to unpack and reveal some of the meaning in the Thoth deck to me.
well, also Christ is the 77th generation from Adam, according to the biblical genealogy. So lots of stuff with 77. We'll have to keep that number in mind. I'm sure we haven't seen the last of it. But again, you were talking about Mobius being missing. He's the 7 of the Enneagram.
Right.
So we go forward from here, and we're seeing that this moon is about to crash into the world and destroy it, the world that they're on. I found that interesting because this character, Sylvie, it's basically the word silver, and silver is the moon. She is set to destroy the TVA. That's her entire mission. And moonlight is the decaying light, whereas sun is like the generative light. She's basically the moon to Loki's sun. You get that anima animus thing going on. Now here's the one that I found that totally threw me for a loop when I stumbled upon this accidentally. Okay, do you see this? In this scene, they go into another building to hide from the meteors. She tries to enchant Loki by putting her hands on the back of his neck, and their foreheads almost touch, and there's a long, awkward, romantic pause. Thank you, Dylan. Ichthys is not 77. Okay. I knew that article I was looking at was a little too schizo, and I couldn't on the fly go add it all up. Thank you. Okay. We'll leave the Ichthys in 77. Not a thing. Anyway, if you see the way that the silhouettes of their heads and the space between them is shaped, I immediately was seeing a heart shape, the heart symbol. So I went to go search for like a clip art heart symbol to just overlay on the top of this. And I came across an interesting little piece of information that I think I've seen before, but lost. And it just revealed itself to me again that according to the mainstream, the heart symbol, as we know it, originates in 5th to 6th century BC Egypt, as it represented the heart-shaped fruit of the plant Silphium. Silphium? That sounds like Sylvie. Sylvie? It's basically the same word.
Right.
And this Silphium was used as a contraceptive and an aphrodisiac. So you have that dual use of opposite functions. It's mercurial, And to me, that's like symbolic of Loki and Sylvie. Are they going to kill each other or love each other, right? That's what you're thinking in this moment. That's the moment that's happening right here, and this heart shape comes up. And recall, the last 2 episodes had faint to somewhat strong references to aphrodisiacs. This is the 3rd time that we're getting an aphrodisiac reference. Allegedly, this Silphium was used to the point of being made extinct. They used it all up, but that they got the heart symbol from the logos that were on shops that dealt in pharmakia in that 5th to 6th century BC era of Egypt. And that's where we get the modern heart shape.
Wow.
Yeah. So there you have it. The heart shape is related to pharmakia, oddly enough.
Dude, nice dig, Chance. I love this.
It just fell in my lap. I couldn't miss it. Blew my mind, though.
So okay. So this fits in with the February of Aquarius because of Valentine's Day. So that is a nice fit for the star card weave. But I love this aspect of having to use drugs or pharmakia to supplement the erotic experience. Like, because she tried her magic on the guard at the TVA in the hallway and it didn't work. And now she's trying her magic even on her own self, her own mirror, divine twin, and it's not even working on her own self. And so there's like kind of a subliminal desperation around getting the mojo to work. And again, I got to say, um, I know that they seem to be trying to make this an actual romantic spark between the two Lokis, but I think they're not doing a good job of it, but I think they're not doing a good job on purpose. I think they're missing the mark on trying to spark up some sort of romance between them, and it just isn't happening cinematically. But it's not like they're really trying. So it's hard to really pinpoint, is it the director, is it the film, are they do they want it to actually have any romance, because it just keeps falling short of what usually would hit the heart feels as a consumer of the art. It's just missing the mark for me. So that's interesting that you're picking up on, supplemental chemicals that would induce the sense of eros.
Yeah, I feel like the bringing of them fully together, they're also giving us the idea that that would end everything. So you have to keep the poles apart. That's how a battery works. You have to keep the positive side and the negative side
Right.
separate for the charge to jump the gap. You know, there's something about that. Like duality would collapse, which reality itself is a duality. That's in the mix. I wanted to zoom in on this coin of Magus of Cyrene. And one thing that you'll get, I think a lot of the so-called ancient kings and queens and rulers are actually astrotheology and deities that are, various names and epithets. And we're being told, oh, well, it's on a coin, so that must have been like the king putting his face on the coin or the queen putting their face on the coin. I'm sus about all that. I'm very sus about all of supposed history. But pointing out that the age of this coin is supposedly from 300-ish to 75 BC, and it has the silphium on it, I would challenge the audience to help me figure out, is that really what this is? I think that there's a bigger mystery with this so-called silphium plant. I don't know that that's what that actually
He's
is.
got the
Because it was supposed
horns
to have
again.
been already like extinct by this point, or not used commercially anymore.
Yeah. Do you see how he has a horn coming out behind his ear? At first glance, it looks like his hair is combed backwards, but if you
And the laurel wreath on his
stretch
head.
if you stretch the imagination, that thing that's covering the top half of his ear could be construed as a ram's horn pointing forward, and that is
Well,
a
they put
sign
that
of
on like Alexander the Great and other such
yeah.
so-called ancient super kings.
Yep. And one thing I love about that on coins is it proves how long they have been putting things in plain sight, where you presume that it means one thing. Common sense would tell you it means one thing, but if you have initiated eyes, you can see that it means actually the exact opposite of what everybody else was thinking. But yeah, that's a horn of initiation on that ear right there.
Good stuff, man. So this one shot tells us a lot. Actually, this little scene they have in the room, it's just full of it, man. And as if to confirm my previous weave about the heart shape between their heads, she asks him after they break away, her magic isn't working because she wants to enchant him to get the Timpad MacGuffin from him. And she's like, well, where is it? Where'd you hide it or something? And he says, in my heart. So immediately we get the heart. And she threatens to cut his heart out to get the Timpad, the broken heart symbolism. But looky here what's behind. See what's behind them there? Those are fans.
Wow.
Just hiding
There's
in
the
the background.
fan.
So, as described by Virgil, where he calls it the Mystica Vanus Yaki, Yaki being Bacchus. This is, in my professional opinion, this is the mystic fan of Bacchus. And going back, if we jump back a few bazillion slides, see what Fortuna Tish has? That's also a fan. So the fan is, let's jump back to here. There's so many things I want to say about this. I'm going to actually, well, first, the phantom is the priesthood, as in the phantom that's in the temple, profane as the uninitiated, right? Then on the left here is Phanes. Phanes was called Metis, which is wisdom, an anagram for Temis or Themis. Phanes is born of Kronos or time, where Kronos creates the egg that has the serpent around it, and Phanes is born out of it. Same exact story as Mithras. Phanes was called Dionysus. Dionysus is Bacchus. This is Noah. This is Jesus. This is the firstborn of the first cause. This is a hermaphroditic being. You see the breasts and the man junk. In the Orphic hymns, he's even referred to as Lord Priapos. That's Priapus, which is the Herm statue, giant dong. All of that is in here. There's just so many things. We need to talk more about Phanes someday. Maybe even like just do our own stream about it. Remember the Mobius? There's the Zodiac, which is the Mobius around him. But in terms of fan symbolism,
It's even got the Crator. The cup at the bottom is the Crator constellation.
Good call.
Which is often depicted. Yeah, the Crator cup is often depicted with Terpsichore, the dancing muse. That's something I'm kind of picking up on. Is some of these articles around the zodiac are symbols of the muse in particular, but one thing I'm dialed in on is the cup.
And you see the GBL, the braiding around him of the serpent,
right? Like
and it's also Lucifer. You know, this is Lucifer as well, the beautiful first creation.
Yes, totally. Yeah, man, that's really. Oh, and another thing about the fan, because we're in the fornax.
Dylan says Phano was the name of the planet Saturn prior to Kronos. Gotta keep that stuff in mind. I need to have that memorized. Oh, the name of the planets before they got their names attributed that we have now.
That makes me think of piano right there, keeping time on the piano. But so this little bunker that they've dove into to have this lovers quarrel, the bunker that they dive into is being showered with meteors before they break into this place and have this little spat. That bunker is the shape of the Fornax constellation. One of its many articulations is basically just a rectangle with a nondescript entryway on the side of it. And so it's very apropos that you're pointing out that there's a fan inside of that, whatever. It's like a pump station of some sort, like a utility station. It's very nondescript, but they're working out their differences. It's a conflagration outside. The sky is
fan
falling.
is used as a symbolically to purify the grains in the threshing process. The wind purifies in this is Virgo season.
Yes. And so I would say, since they're in the fornax right now, that fan is going to very likely be the Phoenix. So let's see. There's the fornax on the Uranus River. And so just off a few degrees is the Phoenix, which will be the fanning of the wind. But then also there's
Phoenix.
Yep, totally. The sculptor constellation is going to be important here as they are about to sit down at the table. But yeah, I just wanted to put all this on the map. That it's interesting that there's a wind element, a fan element right next to the fornax where they're working out their differences.
Fantamus.
Nice,
Fantamus
nice.
of the
And
opera.
another thing about the fornax constellation, this will be the location where they're producing the dye, the purple and the blue, the royal blue or the royal purple dye is manufactured out of the Fornax constellation. So that explains the color purple on the star card, as well as the color purple of this planet when they go outside,
It's very
because of
purple.
the tier purple is making everything take on that hue.
And I wanted to show how the fan is such an important symbol that is way overlooked. But okay, check out the left here. We have Eros, which
Yeah.
is the savior. This is the spark of attraction between God and goddess, or mom and dad, male and female. That's why it's the savior, because the spark of attraction between the two poles is what generates manifest reality, generates life, causes existence to continue to exist. And Eros holding or offering a fan and a mirror to a lady. And what's going on in the scene with the fans? They are, let's back up 2 slides. Mirror, fan, mirror, fan. So it's for sure there. It's 100% there. Now, we said that the fan is used to symbolically, energetically, and literally purify the grains as the separation from the wheat from the chaff. The fan blows away the chaff. And it's also involved in this winnowing fan is involved in the Dionysian rites and the Eleusinian mysteries. It's pretty much just written off by most of the scholars, right? They're like, oh, they're just borrowing farming implements that they're familiar with and making them into sacred objects. No, dude, the farming implements are sacred objects. You're missing the point. But as you see here, this is the infant Dionysus in what's called a, let's see, what does that say in Greek? Lychnon. So the lychnon is the basket that the infant saviors ride in, like your Moses riding down the river in the basket. There's lots of examples of the savior in the basket. There's Osiris in the coffin. That's the ark as well. And it's the microcosmic ark in a sense. But that's the whole earth holding the souls of the deceased for the next cycle of regeneration. The other thing to remember about, okay, so what I'm trying to point out here is how the winnowing fan is also the cradle or the basket that the saviors ride in. It's the same symbol. And that's also the oar of a boat. So the Lychnon cradle is the ark, is the fan, all kind of wrapped up in one symbol, if that makes sense. It's a multi-dimensional symbol. And then as we move forward to this next slide, on the subject of fans and Venus, I just thought you would get a kick out of this Gorgonia flabellum, a Venus sea fan. Why I bring up Venus is just because the word fan is Vanus, which is basically Venus. That's the word in Latin, Vanus. Dylan made that connection in one of his Spirit World books. Shout out Dylan. It's great synchronicities.
Nice.
To point out, syncretism to point out. But this on the left is called the Heimdall Tarot. I feel like this might need to be your next project once you've put away the Crowley Tarot. The Heimdall Tarot is wild, dude. And this is the Justice card. I kind of got it cut off in this slide, but this is the Justice card with the 30, which is the numerical equivalent of the Lamed. And there's the X rune. Can't remember what that rune's called. Need to look up on my rune symbolism. But as you can see, the peacock tail and these feathers, that's another fan symbol. See what I mean?
buddy. Dude, you got me peaked. I'm totally interested in this Heimdall tarot. There's something going on here. It's totally calling me in. Yeah,
It's
I'm a
like
huge fan of the
Haindl,
peacock.
Haindl, Haindl.
I love it.
It's
I
quite
love it.
obscure. I first heard of it from Lindsay Sharman of Rogue Ways uses it. It's like the Omni Tarot. It's like all the symbolism everywhere pulled into one tarot.
Nice. Well, one thing I love to point out, we use the word fan, like I'm a fan of that person. Well, a fan of the person will be the person who's literally standing at ready to fan them. You know, if you admire a person, then you want to please them. You want to be the source of their pleasure, and so any chance to come along and be their fan is kind of intrinsic to the role. So yeah, I love that. That's really great.
I'm just going to pull up what Dylan shared in our chat here because it looks great. Gorgon symbolism and fan symbolism. I feel like it's an unexplored avenue for you, Gabe, who is so interested in the Gorgons.
Yeah.
So this is
Venus. She has a bunch of Venus has a bunch of little baby angels surrounding her, and so the angels intrinsically will be cooling her off. Sometimes just by their wings, but sometimes with the fan as well. Oh damn! Look at that! Wow.
Yeah, so the fan is also
Wow.
like the shell that Venus is riding in, which remember, she's emerging out of the sea on that shell. So it's the basket, it's the ark that's carrying her. She's born in it. So, the baby in the basket, the shell, the fan, you see, it's all the same thing.
Yeah,
This is a
she's
great
also the
example to
froth.
illustrate the point, Dylan. So thank you for that.
Yeah, man, that is a good one.
Some
Love how
old ass
the snake.
Etruscan.
Yep.
Cool. Oh, and here's more.
Oh, look at that! Look at that one. So that one's got the those loop-de-loops that make basically the hood of a cobra has that symbol of the double loops that make a horseshoe shape. That is the symbol of the north node of the lunar standstill cycle. So there's a north node, and then if you turn it upside down, it's a south node.
So remember, Libra is ruled by Venus. Venus is basically the Medusa, because what happens when you go through the gates of Libra? You get turned to stone. Everything freezes. Winter's here. Death and stasis.
Totally.
So there's this idea of equilibrium, the equilibrium of death, the equilibrium of stasis that's going on once you get into winter. And then the other Venus-ruled sign, Taurus, once you've crossed into Taurus, you're now unfreezing. You're in the equilibrium of flow. So lots to think about there. Better keep this party rolling, though.
Nice.
Yeah, this is
Power
rich.
Power
this is rich. This show is rich for analysis, man. Now, I liked this shot because if you can make it out here, these two craters are a lot like, first of all, scale symbolism, because you have this balancing post between the two, dishes of the scales. Or you could even look at these scales as an inverted pair of mountains. Like instead of a mountain coming up out of the ground, it's it's concave instead of convex, right?
Right. Nice. I was seeing it as the two bowls of the Justice card again.
Yeah.
And also obviously the collision of two worlds, the two Lokis. But again, I just have to point out the Krator constellation is the cup. So again, with the cup, they started with the cup, with the scenes of the two teacups, and here we are with two cups yet again.
So now they're getting to know each other as they're walking through this apocalyptic desolation, and he says to her, he wants to know her name, so he says to her, "I'm sorry, but I'm not calling some faded photocopy of me Loki." And I find that interesting, just to point out that the generations of incarnations of the Savior, the firstborn of the first cause, Metis, Phanes, Noah, Bacchus, all the different incarnations, Adam to Noah to Pythagoras to Christ, etc. They're basically akin to copies of each other in a repeating cycle. So the photocopy of Loki, that makes a lot of sense to say it that way. And the variant idea now takes on a very different twist when we consider that is what's going on with all of our mythology and our gods and goddesses. Now, she says her name's Sylvie. Right before he gets her name, Sylvie, we finally get the reveal. She's Sylvie. She's walking too fast for him to keep up, and he complains about it. She's quick Sylvie.
Nice.
In the English, in the Old English, quick actually means living. So when you say quick silver, you're saying living silver. In the Latin, it's argentum vivum. So in reference to Sylvie's new name and the argentum vivum, let's read a couple passages that I abridged them a bit, but these come from July's End, Dylan's third book, Spirit World, July's End. Revelation chapter 2, or Revelation book 2, verse 17. To him who overcomes, I will give some of the hidden manna to eat, and I will give him a white stone, and on the stone a new name written, which no one knows except him who receives it. So she's given herself a new name that no one knows except her, and now she's given him the secret name. Also, manna is falling from heaven, as it's being described in Revelation here, while there's stones falling all around them, little white streaks, white stones falling around them. Now, to quote Dylan in a slightly abridged passage from July's End, he says, the manna corresponds to the dewdrop hieroglyph that is depicted with the stork. Silver is divine wisdom. Gold is divine love. Thus, the stone that Jesus gives to those who overcome pertains to divine wisdom. The manna, the dewdrops from heaven, the Christos, the argentum vivum, the cerebrospinal fluid. Mercury is the bread from God. Using the phonetic Kabbalah, gamos is marriage in Greek. Hyros gamos is the holy marriage or sacred marriage between a high priestess representing Inanna and a young man who represents Demuzid, who is Tamas, a shepherd during the Dooku ceremony before the new moon at the autumnal equinox. Is Christ not the good shepherd? Remember Demuzid the shepherd, Tamas the shepherd. Christ is the good shepherd, Krishna is a shepherd, etc. Is Inanna not representative to the aging sun at the end of summer? Ancient Sumer? Ancient Sumeria? Is this not allegorical for a royal marriage or an alchemical marriage? There's so much more in that book. You guys, if you haven't been reading Spirit World, you should catch up. Sylvanus, Roman tutelary deity of woods and uncultivated lands. That is also in the mix with Sylvie. I'm leaving that on the table for future weaves, though, to get into the woods and uncultivated lands of Sylvanus. And now she decides to ask him, what makes a Loki a Loki? And I thought we might bring up again that Loki is a 4 in the Enneagram. And the 4 is the number sacred to Hermes. The individualist is a 4 because 4s maintain their identity by seeing themselves as fundamentally different from others. So he's threatened when he sees the mirror to himself, he wants to be unique. 4s feel that they are unlike other human beings and consequently that no one can understand them or love them adequately. They often see themselves as uniquely talented, possessing special, one-of-a-kind gifts, but also uniquely disadvantaged or flawed. More than any other type, 4s are acutely aware of and focused on their personal differences and deficiencies. It sounds like, the special boy, secret king gamma type are probably 4s that are caught up in their shadow. Right. They're moody, self-absorbed, dramatic, all of that.
Yeah.
But the funny thing is that if they if they could just convert from their shadow to the light side of the four behavior, they could be very useful to the world. You know, they could be
Yes.
mercurial
Yes.
agents that can do a lot of good.
Yeah, man.
That's the
Yeah,
funny thing about Mercury. It brings good. It brings good to where there's bad, and it brings bad to where there's good. So you got to watch out.
nice. So the number 4 personality has a shadow of envy. And the infernal name of envy is Leviathan. And Leviathan is the name of Thomas Hobbes' book that he wrote about the social contract. And long story short, everybody in the world has a copy of Leviathan where it's a big colossus on the sky, and he's basically the sovereign. He's a king, but his body is made up of a bunch of humans. But everybody in the public has a copy of this book with the back of everybody's head making up the corpus Leviathan, looking up to the sovereign. But the sovereign, he has the only copy in the world where on his cover of the book, he sees the front of everybody's head as though they're looking at him. So he's the special boy. He's the individual. He has the only copy where all of the population is looking up to him as the monster that calls all the shots. You know, everybody out there in the public, they get a copy of the book that gets the back of everybody's head. So it's so fascinating, the ego trip that is intrinsically designed into the book, the Leviathan, that Thomas Hobbes wrote for future kings to come. So yeah, all of that is kind of part of my weave around the number 4 individual with the shadow of envy, Leviathan.
Another thing to say about, speaking of Leviathan, which is a big serpent, right? Silvi, that root silv, is basically salve, which means save in Latin. We know the brazen serpent is the symbol of salvation. The serpent raised on the pole, Jesus on the cross. Going back to the Herm that we showed, a lot of the Herm statues, the Terminus statues, were the savior on top of the post that had a cross T shape. That's all there. Now, there's a funny thing that happens. I found it funny that he's trying to figure out what she's up to. And I tried to like put these screenshots together to be like a comic book. He's complaining how, oh, you just want to destroy the TVA. You're going to create the ultimate power vacuum and then just walk away, huh? And then they get up to this house and she decides to brute force kick open the door. And then she gets hit by a power vacuum. Basically, this looked like a power vacuum, you know, that she gets blasted with, like a reverse vacuum, because it shoots some kind of air or force out. So it's like a reverse vacuum, but I feel like that was on purpose joke, power vacuum.
You know, I think dude, you know what? You're really, you're hitting on a nuance, but it's so correspondent to what I was thinking about. This particular, because then he goes and he tries his luck to try to talk this lady down. He gets blasted as well, the same exact way. But
yep, and he does it by instead, you know, diplomacy and guile. He tries to impersonate a man that's in a photograph with her in the room, who is said to be named Patrice, Pa thrice, triple father.
Nice.
And he tries to sweet talk her, and she immediately blasts him with the power vacuum because her old Patrice would never have said nothing that nice to her before.
In 30 years. So
and 30 is Lamed. Lamed is the number on the adjustment card, or the
hot fire. So the letter on the adjustment card. Yes. So the aspect of falling backwards is become very, very symbolically meaningful. It carries so much more for me. It really packs a punch because of the nature of the Thoth deck Fool card. He's falling backwards. You can see his heels. You can see the bottom of his feet because he's falling back. Where the Rider-Waite Fool card is going to fall forward off of a cliff. And that difference has been accentuated by the fact that we have all of these falling, died suddenly events. where so many people have been part of a ritual where now they fall backwards all of the sudden. And one in particular was during the football game with the Bills versus the Bengals when Damar Hamlin gets taken out and he falls backwards. And he's number 3. He's totally the fool card. And on the glyph of the fool card is this triangle. It's a triangle with inside of a triangle. It's the pedophile triangle is the glyph of the fool card. So it's so apropos that they were just talking about a vacuum, which would have pulled her in, we think. But then it turns out it goes the opposite direction and it generates the exact type of fall that is unique to the Thoth deck fool card, falling back on the ass. Because that's how Thanos falls. Whenever Thanos wants to disappear, he's always falling backwards into his disappearance. Even Loki does a backwards fall at the very beginning. And so all of these, it's kind of like a
The
trust
trap door
fall.
too in the bottom below. It's kind of like that.
Even that, totally. But the thing that I'm finding is that it's we are learning in this generation not to trust the trust fall. It's going to be
Look
a hard
before
lane.
you leap. Do not
That's it.
jump in ass first.
That's it. That's totally it.
It's interesting too that she calls them devils because these are Fanae's characters, Luciferic characters who have a fall and then become the devil in the winter half of the year, which is where we're going. We're going into the winter half of the year, so they are devils in a sense, or they're about to be. And on top of that, this is said to be the year 2077. And since we're taking a Crowleyan lens through this episode, Libra 77 was the book of the devil, according to Crowleyites. They call that the book of the devil, oddly enough. Probably a lot more that we could mine out of that, but not someone that's ever taken the time to thoroughly read Crowley, for better or worse, whatever it may be. So forgive any misunderstandings I have about him if you're a Crowley apologist. The part of me wants to think maybe there's something else to it because of how widely vilified he is. One of those characters so widely vilified that maybe it's like an opposite day thing. But sometimes an asshole is just an asshole too. It's hard to know.
Good point. Good point.
But even that's the thing too. Another thing about this series though, that was really clearly like explicitly stated in the previous episode and is a very Mercury idea is that no one evil is really evil and no one good is really good. And I'm sure that applies to Crowley. I'm sure that there's some, as Michael Tessarian used to say, you can give him a few gold stars and he would point out some things about the philosophy that he would approve of, give the thumbs up to.
Right. One thing that I find fascinating about Crowley, I stay so ambivalent. I say more ambivalent than I ever thought I would, really. But one thing that I find very fascinating is that he was chased out of the Americas by the Espionage Act. And the Espionage Act has a fascinating history. It's basically been used time and time again. They just dust it off whenever they need to go to war. And so they'll use the Espionage Act in this really old gimmick where they generate a bunch of people who are away from their home, immigrants, an immigration. They'll generate an immigration with political turmoil in the people who become immigrants. They are then put in a pressurized situation where they basically become recruited for to go off to war. And that happened during the Mexican Revolution, and then it happened again during the World Wars. And I just find it fascinating because Crowley was chased out of the United States using the Espionage Act, and some of those lines from the act that was lit under his ass to get him to leave, some of those are still the bedrock of the Patriot Act today. And so in the strangest ways, the mechanics of of politics from his day are going to be drummed up again right now. And it's just fascinating that the Espionage Act is still around and it chased him out, and it might be chasing some of us when they come swinging the axe for the big reset.
I'm good. I'll be good. We got a lot of guns here in this country. I think we're all right, most of us. Now, while we're looking at this lady, she tells them about the Ark. The Ark is where everybody went. She's wanting, the locusts are wanting to know, where is everybody? They went to the evacuation vessel, explicitly called the Ark. And I couldn't help but feel that this whole episode is a big moment of vindication, affirmation of what I quote from Godfrey Higgins in Anacalypsis all the time, that the crescent moon symbol is secretly the Ark symbol. And here you have an image of the Akkadian moon god, Sin, like the fall and sin, holding an omega and holding a crescent in the other hand. He's got horns, and he's on a boat. He's on an ark. The other name for the Sumerian moon god Sin is Nana. So, again, this is one of those situations where I'm like, I'm pretty sure this is Inanna with a beard, just like Aphrodite sometimes has a beard. It's all the same guy, and it's a hermaphroditic character, and it's the savior. But I'm probably intentionally, all of this is getting completely obfuscated by the allegories of people who came later and wrote stories to apply to these old inscriptions, carvings, sculptures, etc. So now we have a big confusing mess of like a bazillion different gods and goddesses when we're talking about the same guy the whole time through every system and every version. I mean, look at the symbolism. It might as well be scales. He's on the boat. He's got the horns. Aphrodite is shown with a beard all the time. That happens all the time. This is probably, anyway, I just wanted to validate, affirm for Higgins' sake, fighting for a great mind that was mostly swept away into the dustbin of forgotten geniuses, that the moon symbol it's also a symbol of horns. You can see the horns of this crescent moon, but it's a symbol of the ark. And I'm pretty sure it's like a Steiner thing, or just like a general occultism idea that the moon is the container or the ark that holds on to the souls of the dead between incarnations, that there's some kind of like storage element to the moon as well. And hey, that applies to the cornucopia in a sense. It's like storage, for the life in between its cycle. It's been plucked off the vine, so to speak. So it's been removed from,
that's right,
where it's alive. It's kind of in limbo, and then it's going to go become part of something else.
That's where the spiritual moonagerial class presumes to be processing our papers. The moonagerial class. But Chance, I'm looking at this picture in particular, and just spitballing. What if this is the two different routes to the Americas? What if on one part of the season, let's just say the fall, you would take, I'm just making this off the top of my head, but you would go from a more southerly route from like the tip of Africa or Morocco, and you would come into the Caribbeans through a southerly route in one part of the year. And then if you want to go back to the east, you have to take a much more northerly route and go around on an arc, following different seasonal currents. And the reason I say that is because look at the difference in the lengths of his pant legs. It's like one pant leg is long, the other pant leg is short. He's got one hand going down and the other hand is almost steering up north, as though to say the leg of one journey takes this many marcations, and the leg of the other journey cubits is much longer. Yeah, totally.
It could be
just a weave.
Well, another weave that I want to put on top of this is how, since this arc crescent moon shape also seems to represent horns. And this is obviously a wisdom character. And the arc shape, or the horns, is on his head. And arche in Greek means both wisdom and head. Can we not assume that the character that we see with horns is representation of wisdom, which is the meaning of the name Metis as well? Who is Phanes, who is anagrammatical for Themis.
Yes.
Pant leg almost looks like a fan. It's a good one, Logic. Fan. I see. You're a Logic fan. Gabe, I think I need to pick up the pace for us here. I'm looking at what's left. I think we should move forward.
Yeah, man. Yeah, buddy.
Okay. Still jump out though. If you got to jump on a weave, don't let me stop you. But I got to keep the pace going. So next thing is, of course, they get to this train where a bunch of po folk are, rioting because they aren't allowed on the train. We can't help with Disney Marvel. We can't help bring in classism into the extinction event. Of course. Got to. I just love that. Thank you for that. Now they're getting on a train, a passenger train in dream symbolism. Always consider this stuff in dream symbolism is symbolic of your wish to connect to other people. But it can also show your disconnection from the people around you. If you wish to connect with other people, that means you're coming from a state of disconnect. So it's oddly, probably intentionally, very specific type of symbolism for Loki and Sylvie, who are disconnected from other people and have been for a very long time. And they're starting to maybe subconsciously seeking to wish to connect with others, or at least Loki is, because in this scene, he actually has he creates some Bacchic revelry with all the people on the train. We see as they are now boarding the train, the pouring of the wine, the libations, because, hey, this is Bacchus. Loki is Bacchus. Dionysus, god of the wine. Noah, giver of wine, creator of wine. Here's and we recall the opening shot of this whole episode is the Mai Tais, the very first thing we see. So we're kind of coming full circle here. The champagne is being poured. She turns it down. He drinks hers. He's ready to go double on it. And now we start talking about they start talking about their mothers, because that's what you do when you're opening up on a date. Talk about your family. She's the queen of Asgard and the queen of heaven, thus. And he says she was purely good, purely decent. Pure is Virgo, but decent is the descent that begins following that in Libra. Virgo or Libra is Venus, queen of heaven, and she's purely descent, because when you reach to that point, you're about to descend, and it's the descending sign to the lamb, Aries. It's 180 degrees on the zodiac from there. And they start both talking about how they were adopted. Well, that's part of the Bacchus Dionysus mythology as well. Totally adopted. Even you could consider even Jesus adopted by his human father, Joseph. That's part of the system as well, that the Son of God is adopted often by shepherds of some sort. That happens repeatedly. And a lot of this episode and this scene and this show in general is about the feminized man and the masculine female. Because as they're talking to each other and they both admit to swinging both ways, this lady comes up wearing like a man's suit that hands them the drinks. Although I think Loki is starting to snap out of the whole bi-curiousness of his previous gamma behavior, and he's becoming the more heroic masculine, because in this part, when they're sitting down, he really did not want to ride the train backwards. He doesn't want to fall backwards anymore. He doesn't want to fall ass first into things anymore. He's starting to evolve. He's starting to gain some wisdom as he's heading into this fall scene. But important to point out, as we're considering the gender bending symbolism so prominent in Crowley and stuff, in Disney stuff, big time, that in this simulation theory type of Gnosticism, the world is fake, fallen, created by the fake gas demiurge, et cetera, et cetera. I think that the idea of equilibrium being offered as a potential interpretation of the adjustment card or justice card is the equilibrium between the poles being that stalemate that he and Sylvie have been in throughout this episode, where it's stasis, the equilibrium between them actually nullifying their generative principles, which is what gender bending does. If you get a girly man and a manly girl together, they're probably not going to be very fruitful. We see that in society with birth rates falling. So nullifying the generative powers with this gender bending to create equilibrium, adding to each thing its opposite, right? Adding to the man more femininity, adding to the female more masculinity. This is destroying manifestation, as Crowley says in that description of the adjustment card, which they say is Maya or illusion. They even say, speaking of adding things to their opposites, they have a conversation here about love, and it's one of the descriptions of love that is offered is maybe love is hate. And I guess in a hermetic sense of there's no such thing as opposites, just the one thing and its lack, then yes, hate is actually just love in a lesser degree. That is actually true. I would consider that true. But, we see the nullification idea. Maybe love is hate. That kind of cancels out the whole affair, right? And also interesting to point out that neither of these characters speak of their father while they're talking about themselves and their families. And generally speaking, homosexuality very commonly corresponds with a bad or absent dad relationship. That's a big part of it. So there's a funny thing that happens too, where he's asking her if she's got a boyfriend, and she says that she managed to maintain quite a serious relationship with a postman, and she very, very strongly emphasizes a postman in the dialogue. And I'm like, well, who's the postman?
Nice.
This is the Herm. It's the postman. That's what that's what's a single lesbian Jesus got to do. He's got to use this Herm dildo. She's lesbian Jesus, dude. Man.
Perfect. Too perfect.
It's there though. I mean, why would they emphasize postman? Right? I mean, I think we're talking terminus, right? or terms. It's totally there. Kyle gets it. I'm not just seeing things. You guys all get it. Thank you. Not every day that you get to say dildo in a scholarly and academic way.
So this scene in particular has so many elements of that adjustment card. Specifically, the shape of the windows that both of their heads are inside of is a strange diamond. It's a kind of a kilted diamond. It's just imperfect enough. But also, Chance, do you notice the pattern of the
dude,
rotunda?
that's the Fornax. That's the Fornax constellation. That's what the shape is behind their heads.
Yes, and
they're talking about fornication.
The universal symbol for swing.
This conversation is about
They're talking
fornication, and the
about
Fornex
fornication.
constellation shape is behind their heads. There it is.
Totally. And what is the universal symbol for swingers? It's a pineapple.
Yeah.
Right now, they are inside of a giant pineapple. That is the symbol for do you fornicate? I fornicate. Do you fornicate? We'll put out your pineapple so we can all signal each other that we're down for some pineapple swinger action.
Oh.
And now,
And what's on the top? You know what's on the top of
to,
Bacchus's staff, the thyrsus, is the pine cone with the same exact type of patterning.
the big,
And Bacchus is
the
all
big
about those
pine
orgiastic
cone.
Bacchic revelry.
Yes. Now, one thing about
Swinging.
yes, one thing about the pine cone, I don't want to. Yeah, I don't want to take away the fun. I don't want to make. I think things should be fun and remain like mischievous and ornery. I don't want to take any of the fun away, but I think that pine cone is a form of medicinal application through the ass that circumvents the digestive system, because some medicines, you put it in one side, it doesn't work. There's actually preventative measures in your digestion. So they can literally put medicine in the ass. That's, I think, what the pine cone is secretly encoding.
Suppository.
But we're not going to tell people that. It's a suppository encode. But we're going to keep it Stoochie Boochie.
You can just say that instead of saying stick it in the ass. You can say suppository. It's more like refined language.
Exactly. But this is why if you pull up any of the graphics that I've been sending, the sword card, the Ace of Swords from the Thoth deck in particular is absolutely 100% encoded into the scenery of this scene right here. It's so glorious and obvious to me. But that the Thoth deck Ace of Swords card came up in a weave with the spiders last year when Margaret, what's her name? She went to prison for insider trading. Margaret, she's the interior design cook. I keep wanting to say Margaret Thatcher, but that's not it. She did a commercial last year where she chops a pineapple with a sword. She's in the kitchen.
Oh, Martha
sharpening
Stewart.
Martha Stewart is sharpening a sword, and she chops the top off of a pineapple while she's talking about unwelcome house guests that are the COVID-19. The whole thing was like a swinger encode, but they used it as a commercial to sell jabs. But they did it. They released it on the same week that the Tonga event. There was a volcano on the island of Tonga that looks like the rod of God, where they dropped something huge and blew that whole place up. But it happened the same week that she did her pineapple commercial. Do you have that card? Because you can't. It's so visual. The Ace of Swords card is so clearly the sword that Martha Stewart was swinging, and it's a pineapple. Or if you could pull up any of the graphics I sent in Telegram too. There's a couple of pineapples on there. But that came up the same day that the Tonga event happened. And look how much it resembles a pineapple. It resembles a nuclear explosion, the way that it's described to us. But it's also the interior of the bar where they're sitting down having a couple drinks is literally like they're inside of a pineapple. You see the golden ring that the sword is penetrating into. That golden ring is literally the crown of the bar. in the scene where they're in the train having a couple of drinks together. So,
Or the
yeah,
sphincter.
if we're or the sphincter, totally. Totally.
Unfortunately, I mean, Kyle just pointed out that the pineapple's botanical name is ananas. Ananas.
Bananas.
PK wants to know, does the
Ananas.
pineapple
Well,
have to be splayed in a certain way to be swinger symbolism? All I know is that the people that were down to like do that, to be, join in some couples fun and some Bacchic orgiastic revelry. Back when I went to music festivals, you'd see people walking around just carrying a pineapple with them like it was their pet. And that was their code. That was like, I'm game. Do you want to? So I don't know, maybe like you see cars out with a pineapple sticker on the back of the car, or that's just what it is. The pineapple symbol.
And isn't it interesting that the sword is, you swing the sword. And so even back then, when Crowley was making that deck, he had the presence of mind to use the swinger symbol of the pineapple with the swinger symbol of the sword. And they're in a bar right now having drinks and deciding whether they're going to fornax a Kate or not. Very, very interesting. Oh, and he tries to convince her to take a nap. He says, "Oh, we need to relax before the big show. You should go to sleep." So even in there, there's was that a roofie? Was that a roofie nod? Like, who sleeps in a bar safely?
That's true. She does take a nap. Wow. I'm just seeing all the good stuff that got put into the Vibrant Telegram call-in line. Interesting thing about the pineapple being an ananas is Anna is the mother of Mary. Anna also is the year. That's all in there too. So back to the Fornax constellation, we get taken to the outside of the train for an establishing shot of time passing, right? And you see this big diamond shape fallen into the ground, and it's very slow. It's like, it defies all logic of what you'd think a big meteor impact would look like. It just slowly goes into the ground. But back to the idea of the fall. And that, now I'm starting to see too how, biblically speaking, it's fornication. But, Adam knowing that he's naked and his wife knowing that they're naked, and being like the sexual attraction that causes the fall, which is also what causes them to generate more life and for the timeline to begin. They enter time at that point because in the Garden of Eden, it's timeless. They're in this eternal stasis of perfection. So the fall and the beginning of time are absolutely symbolically linked and related to the awakening of the generative powers in the male and the female, and the, seeing each other in the mirror and what comes after that when a man loves a woman. Now we see Loki's drinking the wine. He gets drunk and he whips the mortals up into his Bacchic frenzy. He starts singing this song about when she sings "Come Home." It's you go look up the lyrics of what they're saying in the Norse, or I think it's Norwegian or something that they're calling Asgardian. And it's basically a song that's about like Inanna calling Tamas back from the underworld. That's essentially what the lyrics are. And, in case we weren't sure about that whole Tamas symbolism, Bacchus is Tamas, etc. And the adjustment orbs are all over this scene. There's one on the table. There's one behind her head. As you're watching this scene, you just see these orbs everywhere. And it's interesting that the orbs are showing up in the two scenes that have to do with the libations, the Mai Tais and the wine.
Bing, 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 bing,
and
bing.
That at this point of the year in Libra is when the wine is getting made. Harvested in Virgo, made in Libra into wine, fermented. All of that is happening. Very interesting. So it's like they know the symbolism. They're doing it on purpose, maybe. Or it's just coming through because it's something universal and archetypes as part of human consciousness.
Yeah.
So then they have another little conversation about love while she's sort of chastising him for his partying down while she's taking a nap. And they have this whole metaphor about love is a dagger. You can see yourself in it. And then she reaches for it. And it said, when you reach for it, it isn't real and it disappears. So this is back to the whole thing I was just describing about how like the love, the generative power, eros, is symbolic of the entering into Maya or illusion. And recall that the Yad-He Vav-He tetragrammaton, 4-letter name of God, transliterates to a lot of different things. We already brought up that it's Eve, but one of the other transliterations, Yad can be a J. And so Yad-He Vav-He can be Jove or Jeve. That's Jove. But remember, Yov and Yad can be an I. So Iove is Yov, but the I glyph letter looks like L. Looks like our English L. So Yov is love. Yad-He Vav-He is love. It's right there. And so they're saying that love, aka Jove, is Maya, illusion. This is that thing, that it's Brahme Maya. It's the mother, father. It's the hermaphrodite. It's Phanes, essentially. Also, the dagger is symbolic of air, mind, wind, all of that air element stuff, thoth, right? That's all in the mix. But yeah, we're getting told basically that love isn't real, that what keeps us in illusion is our dance with the opposite, what we perceive as our opposite, the other, the external. Then the guys come in, sir, can we see your tickets, before they get into a big fight scene with the guards. This calls us back to the first episode where he needs his tab at the TVA. A ticket is a tab, and the tab is an anagram for TVA, TAV. It's basically, your tab is your ticket, your debt. It's your debt. It's what you owe. They didn't pay to be on the train, so they're in debt. Debt is death. Death is chasing them at this point as they are trying to escape from death. And it's, they're entering into the fall. So that's there. Now, we also see, remember the Justice and Adjustment card, the Justice character has a sword, and if it wasn't clear, Sylvie does carry a sword. If anybody wants to take a stab at interpreting those runes sometime,
Whoa.
Please feel free. Don't know the runes well enough to be able to tell you what that's supposed to be explaining story-wise. But some people on the internet were saying that it had to do with her relationship with Thor. So I guess she has a version of Thor in her timeline as well, something like that. But it's a very cool sword prop. I will say that. She stabs some guys with it.
Yeah,
good
it is.
times.
I like it.
They get thrown off the train, though. Loki gets thrown off the train first because he's acting foolish. Remember, he's the fool. She's the adjustment card, god and goddess. He gets thrown off the train, and she's very upset with him. And he's like, I can't help it. I'm hedonistic. It's what I do. And she's like, I'm more hedonistic than you. So they're both establishing their Bacchian, Aphroditean, Hermaphroditean hedonism. And then she walks away, all this eruption of explosions and volcanic-like activity of the planet being destroyed around them. And she does the scream, which we talked about last episode. The scream being intrinsically related to our Krakatoa eruption weave. Big deal there. And yeah, the scenery here is very much like the eruption of a volcano. With all this igneous-looking rock stuff falling from the sky, and then she does the scream.
Yes.
And he's like, did that make you feel better? And she's like, you should try it sometime.
So there's an inaccuracy here in this transition, and that is that after Loki jumps out the window of the train, he no longer has his jacket. It just vanishes. And some people think that there was a cut scene, that there's a missing scene here, but his jacket just is no longer an artifact of the cinematic experience. And in a second, he's about to say that the temp pad was destroyed when he jumped out the window. But I want to identify the fact that whatever the protocol for police should identify themselves, and they need to identify you, and you need to make sure that you're the person that they actually are looking for, and that they're not just grabbing the wrong person. That dynamic is actually like thrown to the wind 5 different ways in the series that is Loki. And that is that in the beginning, nobody knows Loki, but they're trying to arrest him. Every time he gets arrested, the people arresting him don't even identify themselves. So the entire protocol for what it is to be arrested is screwed up 16 different ways. If as you watch the series of the film, they never once do they get it right how you're supposed to formalize who you are, who they are, who sent them, where is their warrant, where is the judge's signature, where's the 2 witnesses on this that signed off with the judge. None of that is observed. It's all completely foobarred. And I just think it's fascinating that here
Well,
he
and
gets
it
arrested. Not
create the
really.
illusion. It creates the illusion that a lot of cinema creates, that the all-powerful government and police can just come and take you away at any time without any procedure of you needing to even understand.
Yes, yes. And the thing is, if you're paying attention, it's really bad in the beginning of the Loki series where you're like, that's not how arrest is supposed to go. It only gets worse. They actually screw it up increasingly more so until by the end of the series, it's even more totalitarian, tyrannical than it already is today. So they're moving the Overton window in a really bad way through the arc of the film. So I just wanted to say that, and I don't think it's a mistake that he loses the variant label right after the cops tried to snatch him up. It's almost like they tried to grab him and he ran away and they were left holding the jacket. Is kind of what it's kind of not explicit, but that's kind of going on behind the scenes subconsciously is what I'm getting at.
Interesting. Yeah, the jacket disappears. I missed that detail, or it just seemed logical in some way. Well, while they're talking,
The jacket, by the way, I got to say this. The jacket is your crime record. Your criminal record is called your jacket. In prison, that's what they call your criminal history, is called your jacket. So when
really?
Beck has that, yeah, so Beck has a song. They say, I want a girl with a, there's a
Isn't it
lyric.
Cake?
I want a girl with cake. Thank you. Yes.
Short skirt, long jacket.
With a short skirt and a long jacket. He draws it out. He's actually saying, I want a girl with a long criminal record.
Oh, and prisoners put false jackets on other prisoners. Like if you say he's a child molester, it's in his jacket, then they might get killed in prison, even if it isn't in their jacket.
And that's, they're addressing you. This is how they address you. Isn't that a trip? So yeah, I just wanted to point out, while he's avoiding the law, he's also getting rid of his jacket. So he's going through an identity, a shedding of identity.
Getting rid of his false jacket, his criminal record.
Yeah.
Wow. Now I'm never going to look at jackets in film the same way. That's a good call, dude.
Yeah. And she has a long jacket.
Yeah. Her jacket's way longer than his. Good call.
Totally.
So they decide that they're going to go stow away on the ark, right? And that's how they're going to survive this, because they broke the temp pad. I kind of skipped over that detail. But he wants to know how her enchantment works, because she knows a lot about him. He opened up to her. You know, he told her what was in his jacket. but he doesn't know about her jacket. So please tell me how your enchantment works at least. And she decides to trust him. They're having this moment of trust. They're getting closer to their equilibrium. And she explains that her mind control powers, her enchantment powers, she has to make physical contact and then grab hold of their mind. That's what entertainment means. It literally means to enter and hold the mind. And she says for stronger minds, she has to, what does she say? Oh yeah, I have it in the next slide. For stronger minds, she has to create a fantasy from their memories. So like, what works on us, man? What works on us to hold our minds occupied, me and you, fairly strong minds, I would say. The nostalgia spell. If they can hit us with the nostalgia spell, create a fantasy from our memories, better chance of entertainment, of grabbing hold of the mind. It's very interesting. Like that's a very explicit, direct definition of the word entertainment. It's like, it's like the hypnotist swinging the watch in front of you and saying, "You're getting sleepy." It's working on you while they're telling you exactly what it is. It's amazing.
Right. And I just point out the nostalgia spell has the Epimetheus is looking backwards. In Epimetheus, he fell for the Pandora. Prometheus, who was the intended target of the Pandora, he was like, "Nah, I'm good. I don't need her holding me back." So his brother fell for Pandora and fell for her trick. So I just think that that's interesting that the nostalgia spell is too much Epimetheus, and the cure is just stay goal oriented.
And she specifically talked about C20 in this scene and how she was a regular person on Earth before she fought for the TVA, and she loved margaritas. And those weren't margaritas; those were Mai Tais. But margarita is an interesting word because it's the stone of the sea. I remember about back when I was reading that quote about the manna from heaven. Heaven is the sea, right? She's C20, and the stone is like the philosopher's stone. There's a lot there as well, just in the word margarita, but we won't linger on that. Here's another shot where you see they're getting to the town where the Ark is at. That's the Ark, but it's really like a tower or a rocket. And you see the moon and the Ark together. To me, that's like what I was talking about. The moon and the Ark, same thing. And see all the people flooding the streets. Book of Lamentations, verse 12. They say to their mothers, "Where is corn and wine?" When they swooned as the wounded in the streets of the city, when their soul was poured out in their mother's bosom. This is the scene where the imagery of the Book of Lamentations gets really palpable if you go read that. All of the like panic in the street and destruction happening. Yes. And there's corn and wine, the horn of radiance, the wine. We're in Lady Luck, Lady Justice, God of Love, Goddess of Love, Goddess of War. It's all right there. And this shot,
there's people going this way and that.
We see Loki with the Limniscate right next to him as well. This is basically the moment where they're fully crossing the threshold of the Analemma right here, which is, I believe, why we're being shown this symbol right now. Because the Analemma is the crossing point where you go over the equinoxes. So they're crossing the equinox into the fall. And now they're really on the hopeless side, the death side, the winter side, as the tower is struck with lightning. The Ark is gone. You hear this song called Dark Moon by Bonnie Guitar, great golden oldie, play, and it's roll credits, So that the final moments of the scene the episode is the crossing of the Analemma and the Limniscate. I think this is a good point to talk about what I see as the big theme of this episode, to bring it up again, that in like the Crowleyan sense or the dark magician sense, equilibrium or justice or adjustment is stasis. See, these scales are in perfect balance. They're not moving. It's pure stasis. Stasis is death, though. The Garden of Eden before the flow of love, essentially, and Eros, the savior appearing, the child, and when it's just God and goddess with no child, it's sterile. It's death. Canceling, as Crowley explains the way equilibrium works, and maybe it's meant to be mental allegory, but it sounds a lot like it's describing canceling out the yin and yang forces by balancing them to destroy the illusion of manifest reality, aka death, oblivion, non-existence, no more birth, right? That seems to be the way it's interpreted by the powers that should not be, with the whole agenda to annihilate as much of humanity as possible, make nature as uninhabitable as possible. And theoretically, based on what I understand of the mystery school, that if you did that, then we would actually regenerate into a Garden of Eden state. That would be the end would become the beginning. The end becoming the beginning, and the circuitous nature of the Osiris character is going to be part of season 2 in a big way. But if this is one way to understand equilibrium or the justice point, the other way, this is the death way, pure balance, stasis. The other way to understand equilibrium is flow, exchange, that type of balance. I think the water cycle on our world is a perfect example of that. That, it goes, evaporates into the air, becomes the clouds, floats over to some place that needs some water, falls, finds its way into the ground, into the streams, into the rivers. And remember, the Bacchus characters are always, Bacchus means stream. So I would like to imagine a world, maybe even the world where this symbolism originated from before being co-opted by the those who never really understood the system and what it was trying to teach about nature. Imagine if the druids or the priest class at one point were mediators between free and independent clans, families, races, where through this mediation by the wisdom keepers, the illusions of false and unnatural hierarchies, restrictions, man's law at odds with natural law, the laws of nature, that's life affirming, That's where birth becomes the norm. Abundance is everywhere. You guys see the difference between the two versions of justice or adjustment, balance, equilibrium being stasis and death, or it's equilibrium of flow and it's life. Everything is unrestricted in its ability to flow and exchange. I think philosophically, both versions are correct and true. I think nature respects either choice. And it's up to us to decide which one we want to achieve in our life, what type of equilibrium we want to achieve. And I think that's one of the primary questions posed by this episode, intentionally or not, maybe even this whole series. And, and the last thing I wanted to throw on top of this is something that PK shared in the Colin line. And I think this is from a book about gematria and numerological wisdom that I have somewhere in the recesses of some phone or some hard drive, but I lost track of it. So maybe PK will kindly resend me the PDF. But he says about the number 35 that we brought up earlier in the show. Pythagoreans called the number 35 harmony. This implies the perfect equilibrium of coordinated forces and agrees with the other meaning of 7. 35 is the sum of 8 and 27, the cubes of 2 and 9. Thus, it represents the perfected expression of wisdom, which is 2, combined with the fully manifested expression of understanding, 3, because the cube, or threefold multiplication of a number, symbolizes the complete manifestation of the power of that number. Harmony, the perfect equilibrium of coordinated forces. That's exact. I'm so glad you shared that, because that's exactly what I'm trying to express with this, the water cycle and this stream
Nice.
here at the end. And that's what the system was meant to be leading us to, with the idea of justice, balance, equilibrium. Because in the fall, when winter comes and a bunch of stuff dies, it's not stasis death, it's an exchange where that energy just flows into a different form, that you have to have that destruction for the regeneration and for new life to emerge. It's part of a cycle. It's not the destruction or the ending of manifestation, as Crowley describes it. That's not what equilibrium is trying to tell us. So this like Gnostic death cult that has definitely, Thelema and Crowley seem to be expressing is, I think, an inversion of interpretation of what came before. And those are my thoughts on the matter, Gabriel.
Nice, buddy. Nice weave, man. Yeah, this was a fun episode. I guess can you bring up my my most recent deposit on our personal telly? This is my only hanging Chad. And this
The
is something that
Tempad
I
one.
think is a fascinating. Yeah, buddy. Yeah, buddy. This is so funny. What I'm kind of marveling at is how many different triggers can be attached to a single mechanism. And that is really what just keeps, I think of them as tethers or strings, these connections or these ideas that attach to this anchoring, this symbolic anchoring. And so the temp pad is essentially the MacGuffin of one MacGuffin in the series. And the shape of it has been imprinting onto me the aspects of the Fornax constellation, because of that archway, that semicircle is very distinct. Well, sure enough, somebody recently, Enter the Stars, Casey from Enter the Stars, he did an episode on the Kopesh, the symbol of the Kopesh, which relates to the symbol of the cough. And sure enough, he has extracted the Trump Mar-a-Lago layout. Trump's pad has the shape of this Kopesh, or this semicircle, which is depicted here. And that letter, depending on what culture you're at, if you go to the Greeks, it's Kopf. If you go, or I'm sorry, if you go to the Hebrews, it's Kopf. If you go to the Greeks, it's more has been considered the phi, the symbol for phi, phi. Now that symbol is a powerful trigger. So if you're looking at it from the Hebrews, it could be Kopf 19, and Kopf 19 just triggered a lot of people for a couple years straight. And so for this to be Kopf 19, because it's the 19th letter, makes it a fascinating trigger, a fascinating MacGuffin. But then if you look at it as phi, it has more of a PHI relationship, which makes it your personal health information. PHI is the acronym for personal health information, which was again a trigger for 2 or 3 years, where everybody's, I guess you could say, interests were exposed. Everybody had this shared vulnerability around your PHI, around your personal health information.
Yeah,
So I
whether
just
or
thought I
not
would
you
take.
were like pro shots or against shots, all of that had to be drug out into the open and a spotlight put on it for many people. It was no longer a private question.
Yes, exactly. And so what that does, when they draw your privacy into the public, they're literally that is the ultimate vulnerability. And so what you identify as, the way you think, your internal sanctuary, all of that is actually violated by any implication that they're going to pull out something that you don't want to give. So the personal health information is just a fascinating vulnerability in the system
Well,
that
it's the
I
jacket.
always,
It's your rap sheet.
it's like a rap sheet, isn't it?
It is.
That's a good weave too. So yeah, all of these things that keep record of you, or, you know, expose things that you wouldn't want people to know about you, they really are all just more proof that identity is the principal vulnerability. Our identity is the first thing that makes us vulnerable, and I just see that as a kind of the universal shared all gimmick that we all relate to, that potential hazard. And strangely enough, it's all encoded in the temp pad.
The Trump
I mean, and
pad.
for women, the word pad, it's the chump pad, totally. And for women, the word pad kind of has a privacy thing, right? And for men, it's the man pad. So that way it has so even from two different genders, the word pad has this different, they both imply privacy that should never be put out in the public, but they're
Well,
also
put
sacred to both genders.
reverse pad and you have DAP, but with the interchangeable letters in that, it's tab. They're keeping tabs on you.
Keeping tabs
you keep
on
tabs on a pad. You write it on a pad, tab and pad, and it's your debt. It's if your PHI is, you know, if your jacket comes up unclean, leprosy, you failed the cooties test or whatever. You're now in a debt to society. You're in danger of death. All of the above. It's Pat. I think that there's something to it, man. I hadn't even thought about the pad and tab being palindrome to one another, philologic palindromes, but they are the tab pad tab.
Right. I love it. Yeah, man. Your record, keeping you on the record.
Which is that circular part of the temp pad as well. Yeah. And time.
Yeah.
You spin me right round, baby, right round, like a record, baby, right round. All right. You good to wrap it, dude? I think we did a great job, man. Some crazy things fell out when we shook this tree tonight. I'm still gonna be thinking about that silphium and whether or not that symbol on those coins is really a plant called silphium, or if it's something else entirely. There's a lot of, the more closer you bring the magnifying glass to this stuff, the more blurry it all gets. It's very fishy.
Yeah, buddy. Yeah, this is a fun one. I'm really enjoying the series. The more we dig into it, the more it reveals itself to be more and more playful, and it only gets better. I mean, I know where things are going. It really does. It picks up and gets really interesting, especially in season 2. I'm looking forward to where this stuff is all going.
I know we're doing all this groundwork just to get us caught up to season 2, so we can talk about the real weird shit. It's gonna be fun.
Yeah, man. And something that I think this is going to do for me. This is kind of something I'm sussing out, that these constellations, there's a system going on to it, and the difference is actually very important. Like for me, I know that Ara Altair is over here in Sagittarius, going into Capricorn. I know that the Fornax is over there in Aquarius more, and you can't conflate the two, but they're very similar. They're very similar, and that's something I've seen. Ara Altair actually becomes more important going forward, and the Fornax is parallel, but not exactly the same. And so these are two symbols that I'm just going to keep track as we go forward. Like there's the Altair and there's the Fornax. They seem to almost be like, if you do something at the altar, it's almost as though you should expect the Fornax to respond. It's almost like the altar is where you chop up the veggies, and then the Fornax is where you go actually cook it. So I just wanted to put that on the table. I think I'm seeing some of the recipes of how these implements work in the cosmic alchemy laboratory of the heavens.
So as we wrap up, guys, I want to offer you the opportunity to support my work here. You know, these weaves, I don't just sit down and let it rip. It takes often 2 or even 3 days of a lot of preparation and thinking about it, and Prometheus, forethought. And being frank, you know, the view counts we currently pull for the channel, they're not like going to get me any kind of view revenue. So I do this because I love it. I'm going to keep doing these weaves because this is the most interesting thing for me right now. But hey, if it's valuable to you and you want me to get paid for my job tonight, hit me up with a super chat, donate on PayPal, Cash App, etc. Lots of ways to do it. Buy some merch. You know, get yourself something in exchange. Get some Tippecanoe herbs. I just bought some more kapow tonight off of Kyle. He's in the chat. I'm glad to see him here. So yeah, support what you love if you love us. Gabe's got a Cash App as well. Slick Dissident on Cash App. And with that, we will see you on the next one. We might even pick this up on Wednesday. We may be overloading people with the Loki stuff, so we could do a different vibrant on Wednesday, but it's kind of an open time slot, so we'll see. But we are going to continue this series sooner than later. And good night, everyone. Love y'all. Have a great evening.
Much love, y'all.